13, 2020 at 6 p.m. And we can do a roll call if everybody's ready.
Yep.
Aldrich?
Here.
Bigford?
Here.
Helmrich?
Here.
Marcy?
Yep. Here.
Osman? All present and accounted for. And if Mr. Graham would give us a little bit of instructions on the Zoom protocol.
Sure, thank you. Just a few reminders for everybody to hopefully make this meeting go as smoothly as possible. We're obviously not meeting in person, and we're meeting via Zoom conference. So please try to keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. Please try to say your name before speaking to highlight who you are for everybody else. If you're joining us by phone and need to mute or unmute yourself, that's *6. As just some reminders, please don't click on any unknown links that may be shared in the message or in the chat. The township doesn't plan on sharing any information via the chat, so it's more just a security reminder. This meeting is going to be recorded and will be made available on YouTube in the following days. Please be respectful of those speaking and avoid interrupting as much as possible. Some of the cross chat can be really disruptive via the online platform. If anyone is disruptive to the point of preventing the board from conducting regular business, you will be given one warning, and after that, we will remove you from the meeting. We haven't had any issues in the past, and I don't anticipate any issues at this meeting. And lastly, please just be patient as much as possible. We're all still learning a new system and trying to be as deliberate as we can when conducting public business. Other than that, I'll give a few reminders when we get to public comment about how public comment's going to work. Other than that, there were some instructions for those with disabilities on the public meeting notice, and if for some reason anyone needs assistance during the meeting, please stop us and we can do the best we can. Other than that, unless any members of the boards have any questions about how this meeting is going to work, I'm good to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the agenda approval. We have a suggested motion in our packet. There it is on the screen. I would accept the motion.
I'm sorry, I'd like to, this is Helmrich. I just wanted to commend Griffin because I had a print version. I actually weighed it, and this is a 4-pound agenda. So congratulations. It's probably a record.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
No, I guess since I'm talking, I'd like to move to approve the agenda and to ratify the procedures for public participation and meeting conduct as described in the notice of public meeting via video conference.
Have a motion by Helmrich.
I will second that.
Support by
Aldrich.
We need to do a roll call because we're not in person. Osman, yes. Helmrich?
Yes.
Aldrich?
Yes.
Bigford? We'll skip
Sorry, I was
Bigford.
muted.
Sorry, Bigford? Is that a yes?
Yes.
And Marcy?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, we have a couple of presentations. Griffin, do you want to introduce our guests?
Absolutely, and I can also unmute Ryan, and let me see if I can make him a host and allow him to share his screen as well, because I think he has a presentation for us. So I'm really pleased to present Ryan Kilpatrick. He's the Executive Director of Housing Next, which is a local nonprofit organization that focuses on alternative housing options in the West Michigan area. Ryan is gracious enough to be here to present to you all today. He's presented to the Saugatuck Township Planning Commission in the past, and it's our goal that this will be the next step in the process of exploring a potential partnership between the township and his organization moving forward. So Ryan, if you want to go ahead and take over.
Great. Thanks, Griffin. Thank you all for inviting me into the chat this evening. I know you've got a full agenda, so I will keep this quick. Real quickly, just to give you a little background about our organization, we were founded by the community foundations in Holland, Zeeland, and Grand Haven, originally to cover primarily the Ottawa County market, including the portion of Holland that sits within Allegan County. But our founding organization is the United Way of Greater Ottawa County, which, as you know, also covers Allegan County. And so as the United Way has grown, so has Housing Next. And so we're now also serving Northern Allegan County. Part of our leadership council is made up of the executive directors and or presidents of both community foundations, the United Way, Lakeshore Advantage, both chambers of commerce, the Ottawa County Administrator's Office, and the Lakeshore Nonprofit Alliance. So we've got a multi-sector background on our board that has been leading the charge for the last about 2.5 years. We were created at the end of 2017. So real quickly, the purpose of our organization is to help provide clarity about the nature of our housing shortage across West Michigan. In addition to our work in Ottawa and Allegan County, we've also done some work down in South Haven as well as in the Grand Rapids market. And traditionally, the problem is relatively the same, that being that we haven't built enough housing to satisfy our workforce over the last 15 or 20 years. And generally what is happening in the marketplace is our middle class is moving down a notch into the housing market. And our workforce, those folks who are earning typically between $15 and $25 an hour, are largely getting priced out of our housing markets. They can't afford to live in many of the housing markets where their jobs are, and their commutes are getting ever longer. So part of our role is to work with local municipalities as well as developers to define public policy opportunities that allow for more housing to get built at the appropriate price points. Recognizing that we need more market rate housing and we need more workforce housing and we need more affordable housing. It's all got to get built. But our local communities are best positioned to decide where it gets built and what the character of those developments needs to look like. And our job is to step in and be a liaison between municipalities and developers to ensure that we're essentially all speaking the same language about incentives that are available, zoning waivers or variances that might be available, special processes through the PUD. We want to make these things as streamlined as possible and ensure that our communities are getting product that they're really proud of, but that also serves the teachers and the firefighters and the local labor force that really needs to be close to their place of employment. So when we talk about housing affordability, what we're talking about is the percent of your income that you're spending on housing, regardless of how much money you make. So for some folks, if you're earning $15, $20 an hour, you've got an average salary of about $26,000 a year, maybe $32,000 a year. That means your monthly housing costs really shouldn't exceed $650, $750 a month. Obviously, as you make more money, you can afford more housing. But even for households that are earning $90,000, $100,000 a year, affording a home that is priced at more than $280,000 or $300,000 tends to be outside of your budget at that income level, unless you've got another source of income or you've got a lot of assets. But what we're seeing in the marketplace is most of the new housing stock that's coming online is priced at $300,000 and up. That's where developers can still make a profit. And, being that they are for-profit entities, that's going to be the product that they build. And so our work is really to figure out how do we get more housing stock built for our workforce that is earning under $90,000 a year. And we're not necessarily talking about folks who are way at the bottom of the income spectrum, though that's also important. The biggest band of earners actually happens to be single and couples who don't have children at home. And that tends to be the last demographic that we think about when we think about new housing. We very often think about single family homes with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. But the demographic you're looking at right now, young adults just out of high school or just out of college, working in their first job, tend to be making around $30,000, $40,000 a year, as well as retirees or soon to be retirees. And what's interesting about both of those market segments is neither one of them demands a lot of square footage. Both demographics are really looking at not necessarily a minimalist lifestyle, but they don't need to have 3,000 square feet. They don't necessarily want to have an acre and a half that they have to maintain. And speaking in broad generalities here. So the types of housing products that we really need more of in the marketplace are more compact opportunities with less square footage, better efficiency, closer together in walkable neighborhoods. Baby boomers and millennials represent the two largest generations in the history of the United States, and they're both demanding more walkable neighborhoods. They're looking for more amenities and less square footage. So quick stat, this is for Ottawa County. It also holds true for much of Allegan County. There's a little bit of a difference, but not too much. More than 2/3 of our population, of our households across Ottawa County, are single and paired adults with no kids living at home currently. We've got lots of seniors whose kids have grown up and left the house. And we've got lots of young millennials that are either singles or just getting married and probably aren't going to have kids for another 3 to 5 years until they feel fully financially ready for that transition. And yet, one of the things that we always think about when we think about new housing stock is that single family house to serve a big family with lots of kids. But we're not building enough housing stock of smaller units. So the other element I want you to think about is the average salary that we have across Michigan, and this is also true for Allegan and Ottawa counties. While the median income, and that is the middle income for our counties, is right around $50,000 to $55,000 a year for an individual, the actual largest percentage of wage earners in our marketplace is earning less than $20 an hour. So the middle income gets distorted by a lot of those households that live closer to the lakeshore and tend to have a much higher net worth and net income. And what we then don't recognize is that more than 60% of our population is earning less than $20 an hour. So in the face of that, what we're seeing is the new housing stock that's coming online looks a lot like this. It's priced very much in this category. This is essentially a starter home in today's market. It's difficult to find new construction that's well below this price point. And so what we need is a lot more product that takes up less land area, that doesn't require as much infrastructure on a per unit basis, and that allows families to grow into their neighborhood and grow into their home. And so what we're proposing is more single family stock, owner occupied, but on compact lots or shared lots, townhouses, duplexes, all still well built, all still meeting the character and quality that you demand of all of the projects in the community, but better leveraging the cost of infrastructure and the cost of land so that we can preserve open space while simultaneously ensuring that we can get price points down into a category that our local workforce can really tolerate. And so normally with a lot of time to yak at you, I would talk about the 4 pillars of municipal support for housing, which are planning, zoning, investments, and abatements. And another time we can talk about all 4. For today, what I really want to give you a sense of is the importance of your local zoning ordinance and how that can impact the cost of development. Obviously, zoning establishes the regulatory framework and expresses clear and objective requirements. There's typically not a lot of gray area in zoning ordinances. It also defines the process for development. If a developer has to spend 12 to 18 months or longer going through the development process, all of that time costs money, and the developer is going to be highly reluctant to just eat that cost. 99 times out of 100, they're going to pass that cost on to the end buyer or renter. And so the more difficult we make the process for the projects that you want, right? Like if it's a project you don't want, I'm not going to encourage you to bend over backwards for it. But if it's a project that makes sense for the site, the more we can streamline that process, the better. And the more that we can really think about allowing some creativity with some guardrails, while making clear your priorities for what kinds of housing you want to see, the quality and character that you anticipate, and the price points that you'd really like to see. Then giving some flexibility to achieve those things is important. So I'm showing you an example of some building standards that have been used in a township up in Ottawa County on the north end of the county. This is an example from my perspective of ways that we are adding costs to development unnecessarily. So we're seeing minimum lot areas at an acre, a little over an acre. And now this doesn't preserve open space, because at 1 acre lot sizes, what tends to happen is developers will clear the entire site. And they'll replace it with grass and a home, not preserving the natural features of the site. And that 150-foot minimum lot width is essentially 150 feet of infrastructure that needs to be installed for properties that are served by sewer and water. And that adds a lot of expense. It's also 150 feet of road frontage that needs to be installed, and that adds a lot of expense. And then lastly, that minimum floor area per dwelling unit, 1,100 square feet it's not bad. But what we'd like to see is opportunities for some smaller homes, for aging seniors. A lot of times getting a 0-step home with 1 or 2 bedrooms instead of 3 or 4 is far more appropriate. And so having minimum floor areas on a dwelling unit drop down into the 750 or 800 square foot range can be very helpful for that demographic, as well as for young adults. So by making that space for more housing choice, what we want to be able to do is reduce the overall infrastructure costs for new development while increasing the taxable value for the township on a per acre basis. Now, what happens here is your individual unit taxable value is not higher than it would be if you had a large lot and a big home, but you're able to get more units per acre and preserve more open space simultaneously, which ultimately allows for higher taxable value on a per acre basis. Where appropriate, some of these developments also allow for better connectivity to daily services, to job opportunities, to employment. If transit is available, that's far more efficient. We're being less lands intensive. And overall, these kinds of projects can be much more economically competitive in the marketplace, where we're beginning to get saturation in the market for a product that is priced at above $300,000 or $350,000, and we don't have nearly enough product priced below $250,000. So quick example, this is a 900 square foot townhouse layout. This is a very traditional layout that you'll find in a lot of communities across the country. Increasingly, you'll find this layout in larger metro areas, including the Grand Rapids market. We're getting some built in Holland right now. We can build this product at below $200,000 with still a quality level of finish, cement hardy board on the exterior, luxury vinyl tile on the flooring on the insides, good appliances, good cabinetry. But the efficiency of land, the efficiency of the unit allows us to get at a price point that the workforce is really looking for. This is a great opportunity for seniors. It's a great opportunity for young adults that want to grow into their neighborhood. It's on a small lot. There's a shared cottage courtyard. This one is pretty well appointed. It's got a lot of craftsman details. That architectural detailing gets expensive, but you can slim that design down and come in at a price point under $250,000 with a very high level of finish. So I'm going to wrap it up. I want you to be aware that our work is not just about local zoning. It's not just about development. Our housing shortage is multifaceted. We're working with local employers to be as educational as we can about the importance of increasing wages and supporting educational growth for their workforce so that they're eligible to earn $20 or $25 an hour instead of $15. We want to be improving mobility options. We want to be leveraging local, state, federal incentive tools wherever possible. As I mentioned earlier, our community foundations have been heavily invested in this effort. We want to continue to bring those investments to hit those right price points. And finally, what we're looking for is innovation in the construction process. We're still generally building houses the same way our grandparents did 100 years ago. And there's something to be said about that tradition, but there's also opportunity for innovation and to get more economies of scale out of a more refined industrial construction process. And so we're working with local partners like Zealand Lumber to find opportunities to reduce costs on the front end in addition to on the land and the infrastructure. So happy to take any questions or log off when Griffin tells me to.
I appreciate you being here, Ryan. Does any members of the board have any questions while we still have Ryan with us?
Yes, Ryan, you said you have some buildings in Holland. Is there any way that maybe we could do a tour or see some of your places that are already developed?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that.
I would like to see them. Yeah, they look beautiful. So looks like something that'd work around here.
Absolutely.
This is Abby. I have a question. So I think I've seen, well, first of all, I love this movement. I love everything about it. It's just, it makes sense. I think it's good for communities. It's good for the environment, potentially. It's just a great concept. Can you speak to, and I think I've seen some in Holland recently and in, you know, greater metropolitan areas, but can you talk about how successful it's been in more of a rural setting like Saugatuck Township?
Yeah, so we don't have great examples in rural environments in West Michigan. We've got good examples in more suburban environments, but there are some great examples that are more national. There is a growing movement around a development pattern that's called pocket neighborhoods or cottage courts, where essentially we're concentrating smaller cottage style units around central green areas instead of big lots, and then preserving larger chunks of the property for natural open space. And those projects do very, very well because what you're not requiring is a lot of that road infrastructure. Even if you need to do shared well and septic or individual wells and shared septic, by reducing those infrastructure costs for roads, you're able to bring costs down on a per unit basis by $15,000, $20,000. And if we're able to allow for developers to really peg a market that has been underserved at the right price point, putting all of those foundations in at once can save quite a bit of money. Having those economies of scale where you're building very similar units with some differences in the exterior features can be highly competitive. So the next big indicator is really the cost of land. And so where cost of land is high, we're still going to struggle up against that. But where we have opportunities to get land at a reasonable price point or partner with other organizations or do mixed income developments where we're still allowing for those larger executive lots, but also mixing in some smaller kind of cottage courts, that allows you to share those costs across developments and can reduce prices for some of those smaller units.
Thank you.
Hi. Hey, Ryan, John Helmrich here. How are you?
Hey, John. Good.
Good. Great seeing you back here. You might have said this up front, but I'm just curious when you were talking about working so closely with various county community foundations, if you have, does Housing Next have a relationship at this point with the Allegan Community Foundation?
Yep. I've had some conversations with Teresa in the past.
Great.
We have talked about a project or two in the city of Allegan previously. I think she's very open to partnering. It's really about Housing Next is not designed to show up and be the developer.
Right.
We're more designed to partner with you as the municipality to help either find a developer for a site that you would like to see developed, or if you have a developer that's already coming in and you need some support in negotiating incentives or zoning, we can be helpful there as well. Obviously, we're biased towards affordability, but the really critical element is getting more housing stock built. And as a longtime planner, I understand how important it is to have community buy-in and to get good projects that the community feels good about. And so what we want to do is help you to negotiate the best possible project that is still satisfying the demand for more housing.
Thank you.
Does anyone else on the board have any questions? If not, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presentation.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
for your time, Ryan.
Thanks, Griffin.
So as I said, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presentation. Elizabeth Estes is going to present for us. She has been facilitating a number of community meetings within the tri-communities as well as the city of Fenville, bringing the business community together to try to work through some of the challenges of the ongoing public health crisis. But I think more importantly, Elizabeth's a township resident, a local business owner, and someone who's been very invested in this community. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her, and she can do a much better job than I can to talk about what she's been working so hard on the last several weeks.
Well, thanks, Griffin. I appreciate it. I talked with John, and he thought it would be better if I didn't have any slides, but I just talked a little bit about what we were doing and then let you ask me any questions you might want to ask. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Elizabeth Estes, as Griffin mentioned. I am a township resident. I own properties and businesses in Douglas and Saugatuck and in the township. I got involved in this kind of accidentally. The day that the EIDL loans, it was April 14th, coincidentally, I remember this, the day that the EIDL loans ran out of money, and they decided to talk about the fact that a lot of people who had applied for the $10,000 weren't going to be able to get it. I just happened to post something on Facebook, just randomly, hey, anybody who applied for this. And within about 5 hours, I had spoken with probably 10 different business owners, 7 of which I'd never met before in my life, who messaged me on Facebook asking if they could have a conversation. And from that, the next day we had a Zoom meeting, and we had 119 people that day sign up. I think we had 111 on the call. We've had 3 subsequent ones, over 100 people every time. And then we've done 3 different surveys and put them out into the community. We had 109 business owners in the tri-communities respond to our business survey. We had 330 residents. And then just recently, last week, we put out a survey for a technology survey to ask what people needed and what they wanted. And we had about 78 people respond to that. I say all this and I've said this many times, and many of you have heard me because I know a lot of you from the township. Thank you for your participation. I know it means a lot to all of us to have you there listening. But I'm Switzerland. I'm not an elected official. I'm not on a board of any kind. I did it, really, it was just a moment where I felt like I needed to do something. And from there, though, thankfully, a lot smarter people, many more smarter people got involved. And I think one of the best things about living here is unbelievable resources and brain power that we have. And so from those meetings, what's occurred is we've created some committees that have actually already put a lot of things together and have executed some things and will be executing coming into the future. I think, and I'll tell you about those in a second, I think the big thing that we learned from these surveys, from these conversations, from the many phone calls I've had from business owners and every is abundant. And it's an interesting fear because it's a bit of a dichotomous fear. So we have business owners who are afraid that nobody's going to come, and we have residents afraid that everybody's going to come. And we have some business owners who fit in a little bit of both of those, not sure what to do. I had a business owner just this week say, I don't think I'm going to reopen for the summer. I don't want to do it. It's not worth it to me. The majority of the residents and business owners want some social distancing practices put into place. And I know that the municipalities are talking about closing streets. There are some business owners who don't want that, but I will tell you, we can't look at this season through the same glasses and lenses that we've always looked at it. We have to take those off and realize that it might be inconvenient for some parking, but there's ways around that, and we can come up with solutions around that. But a lot of the retailers will not be able to have a season if they can't move out into the sidewalks and put their things out into the sidewalks. The city of Saugatuck has already allowed until the end of June restaurants to be able to move their tables and businesses out onto the sidewalk. We have to still work through the Liquor Commission, which many of us will do. A lot of the response that we got from the surveys was that there needs to be some cohesive messaging around what the community is doing to try to keep visitors and residents and guests safe. and through some kind of a safety and sanitation protocol. And a majority of people surveyed want some kind of an effort into the restaurants to limit the number of people, to have the tables moved apart. So what's come from all of this are some committees. So we have a safety and sanitation committee headed by a woman named Lauren Flanagan. For those of you who don't know Lauren, she's a brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur, started 4 or 5 businesses in the Bay Area, moved back here, and lives here on the lakefront in Fenville, actually. And she is a genius when it comes to business and entrepreneurship. And so she has been helping lead that overarching committee, which is broken up into subcommittees. So we have a retail, safety and sanitation committee, a restaurant one, and a lodging one. And they're all coming together as we did this week and putting out some protocols for people to respond to. What we hope at the end will be a cohesive effort with a pledge of the things that we're going to do to try to keep our businesses safe and our residents and guests safe. That will include a badge, a safe badge that says, yes, we agree to adhere to all of these protocols and policies. We've also created a technology committee. One of the things that we learned were that we've got some issues with the internet access, which I know is not a shock to any of you, but even in town, a lot of the businesses are worried about taking their retail sales out into the street because they can't carry their internet to be able to do a sale out into the street. So there's conversations in technology. There are people who are not prepared for this. They don't have online sale ability. They don't have pre-ordering ability. They don't have touchless payment ability. So a technology committee has been formed and there will be classes. We are right now working to try to make these classes available through the SCA, who also is going to take a big hit this summer, as we all know. So that committee is working hard and we're getting ready to roll out what those classes may be as we move forward. And then probably one of the coolest things that has come out of all of this, and again, this is people who have a passion for this community and want to help, is the Saugatuck Douglas Rotary Club has created $1 million small business program. It is Saugatuck Douglas Rotary recently, over the last 5 years, I think, became a 501c3. And because we don't have a true economic development council here, it kind of left a void and a vacuum, which they stepped into. Quite honestly, in some ways, I look at this a bit as a blessing because I am of the belief that what has happened is it's caused us maybe to look at things a little differently, do things a little differently. And by allowing an organization like that, who is not connected to a municipality or an entity, and they're just their own and they're out there doing good works for the world, it might be a great thing. So we're going to raise $1 million. We have seed money already. We have large donors who are very interested in helping us get this off the ground. The program will be made up of 25% grants, 75% loans, and then various business programs for businesses in the area. And one of those is offsetting the cost of some of these technology classes. I think that's the headline. Those are the headlines. I will tell you that, again, I said it before, but I'm so grateful to live in this place because we have brain power and people who care passionately, and the way that everyone came together is mind-boggling to me still, and all of the things that have already been done. We didn't want to just have ideas, we wanted to put them into practice, and it took a lot of people to do that. There are meetings every single day, I can tell you, on these different committees and making sure that we get what we for the business owners and for our residents to feel confident that we're going to do what we need to do. So if anybody has any questions, that's John, hopefully that's what you were looking for.
Perfect. Hey, before any questions, I just want to say, I mean, I'm so impressed and amazed with the leadership that you've exerted in bringing this group together. I think I've been on all the calls. Griffin's been on some, Brenda Marcy's been on some. And even though when you look at the 3 communities, the township probably has the fewest number of actual businesses, but I'm so proud, many of the names you've mentioned, many of the committee leaders live in the township.
Yeah, I do.
You and Mary, there's Lauren, Dave Locker from Lanshire,
Yep.
Bertie Holly, Jim Sullivan, president of Rotary. They're all township residents.
Yep.
So we're invested in this, and it's really exciting to see the joint effort between the 3 communities. So I really thank you so much.
No, you don't have to thank me. I'm grateful to live here, and honestly, it's been a total team effort. It really has, and everybody really has. you know, it's one of those moments where it's painful because of what we're all going through, but there's some solace in the fact we're all going through it together.
Exactly.
And there is a bit of that. And I think the biggest thing right now for everyone is we don't know what we don't know, right? This is such a fluid situation. Will she open the restaurant? Will the governor open the restaurants? We don't know. Will it just be takeout? And I think all of us are trying to come up with alternative plans just in case. I don't like hearing what I heard last week earlier this week from a business owner, like, it's not worth my time. I'm not going to do it. And I said, don't make that call yet. Just don't make that call yet. Let's wait and see. So I think that there is some fear. I will also tell you that one of the questions on one of the business surveys was, you know, how do you think this is going to affect you? And there was a large percentage that said, we don't know yet. And we talked about this today in our Rotary meeting. You know, there are people who acutely need money right now, who got passed by the PPP and got passed by the EIDL, and they need money to survive right now. But then I think there's going to be a larger percentage that, depending on what happens this summer, if people don't come, they're going to need it badly to make it through to the next season. And so hopefully we can raise the money we need for the Rotary Fund to be able to help those people. And we're being very cautious and careful about it. We had both lawyers and bankers on the Rotary Fund. There's an underwriting process for the loans that we have to go through. So hopefully by the time we get through all of that, maybe it'll be July or August when maybe they need those the most. So just so you know, this is kind of ongoing. It's fluid, and I think the unknown is what everybody's nervous about.
Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Elizabeth?
No.
I just have one comment. I'd like to again thank you for doing all this. It's been awesome. I know Saugatuck City has opened up their right-of-way strips between the sidewalk and the curb, and we look forward to seeing some activity there.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful that they've done this, and it'll be a test. And I think there's going to be some more conversation about closing down streets if we can do that. And I know there's some concern. I believe that if we tell people why we did it, we know that this could be inconvenient on big signs on the barricades, but we did it so to allow social distancing for you, our guests, and for our retailers. I think people are going to be more understanding, I think. But you're very welcome. I'm glad to be a part of it.
And I'd just like to add, just on the tail of what John said, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for doing this. Your business acumen is wonderful, and it's kind of nice having you around for a while. So I just wanted to thank you for all your work. It's been amazing.
Well, you're very welcome. Yeah, I will tell you that I've loved being home and not on an airplane. It's been amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Here. So for me, that's a positive. But thanks to all of you guys for all your support. It means a lot when the business owners see you there, see the elected officials there from all the municipalities. It means a whole lot. And I get chats as it's going on, like, is somebody there from Douglas? Is somebody there from the township? And so it's been, thank you so much for being there and being a part of it. And, you know, we'll keep you up to date as soon as we can. And if anybody wants the copies of the Zoom, John knows how to get a hold of me. You can watch all of them. We have all 4 of them recorded. We have all the results from the surveys, which if you haven't read them, there's some interesting verbatims that might be worthwhile to read. So just let me know, and I'm more than happy to share those out.
And I'll just add to that, because these are so valuable, but the protocols that the committees have been working on between retail, lodging, and restaurants, I mean, they're just, I think they're good things for all of us to read and be aware of.
Yeah, and we will put those together in a nice document. We're also somewhat waiting for the health department to put out some more things in the state, so we combine them all so that we aren't reinventing the wheel. And then whatever the badge is going to be, we want badges on the windows of the businesses who want to participate through these protocols. And I think that's been something that every one of the different entities and verticals have said, yeah, that's really important. So we'll let you guys know as soon as we have all those and as soon as we have them compiled. And again, they'll be available on a Google Doc, and you can grab them and print them and use them as you need to.
Great.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Unless there's any other questions from members of the board, let's go ahead and keep moving forward.
Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. Good night.
Madam Supervisor, if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and get a speakers list going for public comment.
Okay, perfect.
Um, For everyone who would like to speak, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. If you would please say your name, I'll add you to the speakers list. We'll work through the speakers list, and then at the end, we'll do one more call for folks who would like to speak. So I'd go ahead and unmute everybody. Would anyone like to speak? Please say your name.
Very ship.
Everything else is there. All the hardware is in here.
Yeah.
Scott Waringa.
Griffin, did you want me to speak at this time?
We're going to go ahead and do a speakers list, and then we'll go through the speakers list. And I got you on there, Dean.
Okay, thank you.
Did you get Scott Waringa?
I will add you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I've got Dean, Terry, Shippa, Scott. Anyone else like to speak during public comment?
Lori Gossard.
Lori, thank you. Is there
You can
anyone
add
else?
Patrick to the list, please.
Of course. Brett, I got you added. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And as I said, if for some reason we missed you, we will make one more call for public comment before we get going. So first, Mr. Dean Kappinga, if you'd like to go ahead.
Very good. First of all, I might have missed it. Did Elizabeth give a website? Because I was so intrigued by what she said. It's amazing all what she's doing. And do you by chance have a website for her?
Yeah, this is John. I don't think she said it. I believe it's Saugatuck Township together.com.
Saugatuck Douglas together.com, I think.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Correct.
I don't know why I said township.
Very good.
Saugatuck Douglas together.com.
All right. Well, anyway, this is Commissioner Kappinga, and thank you for giving me a chance to speak, Griffin. I would just say on the same thing that Elizabeth was saying, through Executive Order 2020-77, the governor's asked for all the counties to have a preparedness, response, and safety work plan. So we're going to approve that tomorrow, but it goes to some of the things that this group's doing, but I'd love to look at that website. I'm going to. There's so many things I think that could add to our website with what they've done already, but they talk about response and safety work plan, protective safety measures, employees with suspected coronavirus. What do you do? Business continuity plan, critical infrastructure worker plan, employee entry screening plan, visitor screening plan, as far as just things that you can do. And maybe she'd want to look at our website too, as far as to see what we have done. I would just add to you, I mentioned to you before, in all this group, your group knows all what's being done. I just got this in my email probably 2 days ago, what community action is doing in your area and the area that we live in. But I just highlighted this. They've done 19,000 home delivered meals, 1,723 wellness calls to seniors, 1,111 families receive food commodities, 2,300 meals delivered to partnership with local school district. Just some amazing things done with that. I'll also tell you tomorrow we're voting on just our animal shelter that all of you I'm sure love. We're so thankful for Wishbone in your area. We contract with them to run our animal shelter for some $52,000, and they do such a tremendous job. We just want to say it in front of you about that. Also, we're voting tomorrow on just trying to purchase and install an audio video equipment and software for live streaming. Some of our other counties, Kent, Kalamazoo, Berry County, are doing that. We think that we have a responsibility to the people to speak to them, that they can hear it. And we can hopefully do that for under $10,000 is what we're looking at. And then just lastly, I know you got a full agenda. We're still working on this tax limitation committee, and we have 5 people. I don't know if you know Patrick Roy from our West Side area, but we have Kevin Brenner, Gerald Williams, Patrick Roy, Harry Beach, and Mike Hill are all that we're looking at tomorrow to select to be on that committee. But great meeting. We had Ryan at our leadership meeting. He is just the guru of housing, has taught our group a lot. But thank you having the speakers that you've had, and have a great meeting, Griffin and others. It's great seeing you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. We're going to go ahead and move on to the SHPAs. You should be unmuted and go ahead. The floor is yours.
Hi, my name's Terry Shippa, 2750 and 2752 Blue Star Highway. First of all, thank you very much for putting my letter on the agenda. I did not expect that. I'm very impressed with this meeting. It's very professional looking, and it kind of goes exactly the opposite of the letter with the zoning board of appeals meeting that we were part of. And I truly do understand that it's brand new technology and all that. So just wanted to say that your meeting right now is very professional. So I just wanted to add a couple of things that I wasn't able to put in the letter because I didn't have the info. And they're just basically 3 questions, if you guys could talk about this when it comes up. The first question is, what is the standard fee for the zoning appeals board? From what we gather, it was $400. The next question is, why were we charged an additional $500 for a total of $900? The $500 was called an escrow deposit. And then the third question, do we get that deposit back? And thank you.
Thank you very much. We will go ahead and move on. Scott, you're next. You should be unmuted.
Okay. Thank you. This is my first the township meeting. I've been to a planning commission meeting. My wife Rebecca and I bought our place at 6618 Dugout Road back in March of 2016. We still live and work in Grand Rapids, or we still work in Grand Rapids, but I kind of feel like we live in Saugatuck a little bit. We love it out there. To give you a frame of reference, we're between Pine Trail Camp and the McEnroe Conservation Easement. So we're kind of tucked right in the woods there. We feel like we got the best of both worlds, access to Saugatuck, but a nice quiet place. So the reason I wanted to speak tonight is just to express, we're kind of disappointed with the Planning Commission's pre-approval of the special use or special approval use for the McEnroe, or sorry, not for the Van Horn project. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with that. In our letter, we have a letter that's also in the agenda tonight, so that covers most of that. That was also signed by Roy and Carol, and then also Terry. The reason I wanted to talk tonight is my wife and I were out there last night to do some things and just have a nice quiet evening. And it got to be after 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, we were outside and I kept hearing construction noises. And at the last township, or at the last planning commission meeting, there was a pre-approval for the Van Horn project to continue its excavation and digging of the pond. And I know specifically the time frame for that was brought up in terms of what hours of the day they could operate. And I think it was requested that it was maybe be like 8 to 5, but he had asked for 7 to 6 p.m. And I think that's what was granted. So when we were out there last night and I'm hearing heavy equipment operating at 6:30, 6:45, 7 o'clock, I was quite frustrated. I actually went and took some video of it, which some of you may have seen because I did share that with John, and he said he forwarded it. Throughout this whole process, we've kind of felt like Chad has kind of thumbed his nose at everything, and this was just one more example of that. It was really disappointing. And so I guess what I'm asking tonight is that if the SAU does get formally granted, that there's pretty strong language in there about what the ramifications will be for a violation of any of the terms. And I know normally, like, there would be in contracts, there would be an opportunity for him to, to remedy the breach. But operating after the hours that are stipulated, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Unoperate the machine? You can't. So I guess I'd love to see it be that if he violates anything, that it get revoked immediately, and that there's an action plan in process or in place for what would happen. But at a minimum, just maybe some pretty strong language about what would happen if he breaches anything in the agreement. And then I don't want to just be negative. It was super fun to listen to Elizabeth. We're super concerned about what's happening out in Saugatuck. with everything going on, and we want to see, you know, what anything to happen for restaurants and shops and all that to be open. And I just wanted to say we have some friends in the Chicago area near Hinsdale, and Hinsdale is closing off a bunch of their streets and letting restaurants, you know, kind of move out into the streets. I think that would be a great option for Saugatuck, you know, with Butler maybe closing the street down. Yeah, it's less parking, but you know, we want to be able to shop there, dine there, spend a lot of time out there this summer. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Lori, you're gonna go ahead and be next. Let me make sure you're unmuted. Lori, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Evening. Hi, everybody. Thank you for doing such a good job with the meeting. I had intended this to be included in your packet, but didn't make that abundantly clear when I sent it in, so I apologize for that. I'm going to read it so that it's on the record, and I have a couple recap statements just to follow it up with. But it's regarding the Planning Commission meeting, and my letter reads, one of the main reasons for the recall of the former Saugatuck Township Board was the lack of transparency. The feeling was that as a voting body, the choices being made were not good for Saugatuck Township. In a fairly large upset, the residents voiced their displeasure and voted a new board. Since life, business, and movement cannot remain in a stalled position indefinitely, Zoom has proven to be a helpful tool. However, at the April 2020 meeting, the Planning Commission rushed a decision without engaging many of the crucial elements of having a team involved, which is fair, transparent, and in-depth discussion. Primarily, the commission members disregarded the public comments. Only one member referred to them, and a shockingly brief discussion ensued. We residents of the township take the time to provide concise and thought-provoking commentary, only to have it disregarded. I understand that commissioners are not there, either by law or their own personal inclinations, to make anyone feel heard, but they are there as elected officials by law to take these comments into account. Another great concern was that I only saw a small handful of the commission members on the screen. Many had their video feed off, and I caution those of you who are on the board and don't have your video feed on. It really does make a difference to see your faces. But it makes it too easy to limit one's accountability. The Governor's Proclamation 2020-48 allows electronic conferencing, but forbids private communications between commission members via email, texts, and such during the meeting. So no video feed, no transparency. Finally, if there were members of the property owner Van Horn's legal team present, they were not identified for the public. No critical decisions, ones that will forever change the unique beauty, just, and friendly place we live in, should be made in the shadows of poor video feed. There was no feeling of accountability, and none of you were listening to each other, let alone the comments. This is no way to make important decisions. You have a duty to be the voice of the whole community so that our collective vision for the area, as expressed in the Tri-Community Master Plan, holds fast. I don't think we want to become nothing but a sprawling, unplanned development and end up losing something irreplaceable. And just to recap, by not using the video capacity of Zoom, we do not know if the planning commissioners were engaged in what was being discussed or even present. This should never happen again. The township lawyer, or number two, the township lawyer, township zoning administrator, as well as the PC chair should have stopped the meeting to ensure the commissioners were engaged and present by requiring video feed. And finally, the Planning Commission decision was procedurally insufficient by not including criteria for how the proposed sand mine and water ski lake changed the essential character of the neighborhood. This is a requirement when approving an SAU. This is exactly why the township was sued for the PC approval of the proposed North Shore Marina. The township lawyer and Planning Commission chair should be held accountable for this deficiency in approving the Van Horn proposal, a procedural deficiency for which the township is likely to be sued once again. I really appreciate the time, and thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Next on the list is Brett. Let's make sure you're unmuted.
Oh, yep.
Okay, yep, Brett, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hi, my name is Brett Paget. I'm the treasurer for Charter Township of Comstock in Kalamazoo County, and I'm also your representative on the Michigan Townships Association Board of Directors. I just wanted to pop in tonight and say I apologize for not being out there in person, but after this is all over, I will get out there. In the meantime, if you need anything from me, the supervisor has my contact info, and you can find me on the website. And then also, MTA is open for your calls if you have any procedural questions or anything like that. That's really all I have to say tonight. Thank you for letting me speak.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. Thanks for being part of the meeting. Is there anyone, we're going to make one more call for public comment before proceeding with the meeting. There is also another opportunity for the members of the public to speak at the end of the meeting. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who would like to speak at this time? Madam Supervisor, hearing none, go ahead and proceed with the meeting if you're comfortable.
Okay, let's go ahead with review of the invoices. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the invoices?
Yes.
John, any
Yes.
questions?
No, everything looks perfect. It looks fine.
Yeah.
Brenda?
No questions?
Abby?
No question.
I don't have any questions either, so I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve all bills and payroll in the amount of 64,000. Oh, I can't see the ending, 300 something. What does it say, Griffin? I can't see the bottom. As presented, there's a, wait.
It would be, the amount is $64,322.94.
Thank you. There's a square in front of the 22 cents.
Is there a support?
I'll support.
John, supported by John. We'll do a roll call. Aldrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Motion carries. So we can move on then to Treasurer's report.
Thank you. So this is my report through the end of the month of April. Our general fund bank balance was holding at $2.7 million, which is flat exactly to where it was on March 31st. In terms of expenditures versus budget, budget versus actual through April is now $371,000 positive, still about the same rate as last month. Spending is running 24% under budget, and revenue is running 6% under budget with 2 months left in the fiscal year. And I'll speak more to the revenue in a minute. On the investment side, our certificate of deposit value at the end of April was $756,000, down $1,000 from the end of March. On a year-to-date basis for our fiscal year 2020 through the end of March, there still remain no department level overages that need discussion. And in April, the bills we just looked at too, I see no notable expenditures that need to be highlighted as of concern or issue. The county, just last week, Allegan County has paid us for uncollected property taxes. Of the amount they sent, we will keep about $50,000 in the town for the township for administrative, cemetery operations and roads. And the remainder goes, we still have a balance left now to pay the fire district and the interurban. So to that point, I would like to seek approval tonight to make those two final disbursements, which will total about $43,000.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, do I need to rephrase it?
Nope, I'll take it as a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Is there support?
I will support. Oh, sorry.
I didn't see who got there first.
Oh, let Brenda.
Okay, Brenda. We'll do a roll call again. Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Aldrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to also mention, year's going fast, even though we're at home most of the time, but preparation will be starting very soon for the summer tax bills. And those go out on July 1st. We are planning to use KCI services as we did for our assessment notices this year. They will do the printing and the mailing, and they can do an insert with information we may want to put on that. And as far as I can tell, based on what they did for the assessment notices, this should be budget neutral, as we won't need to be purchasing postage paid envelopes ourselves, or tax paper from the county, or pay for any excuse me, I don't know, something made noise, or pay for any additional labor in the stuffing and folding and all that. So that work is in preparation. I did just put on here, and Griffin and I talked about this yesterday, it's typically in May where we make any of the fund balance transfers that are in the budget. So that was just kind of a note to make sure we keep that on our radar. I apologize, I want to add a couple other notes that didn't make it into the slide because they came in afterwards. Yesterday, we got the county equalization notice in. This is the notice that includes the millage rates for the next tax year, and also the amounts of the Headley rollback, and information on the public notice that must go in the newspapers. So tomorrow I'm going to go in the office and make sure that's copied. Griffin needs it, the clerks need it, and share that, and our assessor. There was a very interesting MTA webinar yesterday relative to office operations for townships. The one that spoke the most to me, that we'll talk about more probably in the coming weeks, protocols for when the tax season opens, if we're going to let people still come in the office, if we need to do plexiglass, how do we handle transactions that are going to be less than 6 feet, and passing back and forth of checks, etc. So I'm glad the MTA is out there in front, and I'll be monitoring that very carefully. And on the, I did want to mention the portion of the uncollected taxes that comes back to us from the county. That's going to help increase where we are year to date on property tax payments into the township. We're at 130,000 of 142,000 expected and budgeted. And I don't have the exact number with me now, but I know that the amount will take us probably a little bit ahead of, if not right on budget. So I just wanted to allay any concerns on that front. And do you have any questions?
No, I'm going to miss stuffing envelopes, so.
Yeah.
We always kind of had fun doing that.
Oh, we'll find some other volunteer work.
Okay.
Well,
Okay,
thank you. Thank you for your attention.
all right, let's move on to approval of the minutes. I think everybody had a chance to look at those.
Yeah.
Yep.
I move to approve the minutes of April 8th, 2020 regular meeting as presented.
Okay, motion by Aldrich, second.
I'll support.
Second by Brenda. I'll do the roll call. Aldrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next item. We have some correspondence from 4 different people. We would like to accept that as information. We've all had a chance to read it. Any comments, any questions or discussion?
I have a process question. I'm just curious, do we have either a policy or something? When we receive a very detailed correspondence that's directed explicitly to the members of the board. Do we acknowledge that? Do we work on a draft to go back to them, or is it just accepted as we're doing tonight and referenced here at the board meeting?
Generally, it's accepted as information because we're not taking action on any of these items.
Right.
It's always appropriate for our manager to respond and acknowledge any communications and just to acknowledge that we received it. We're not taking any of these things lightly. We take it very seriously, but during a meeting when it's not an action item, it's difficult to take any action. We can't take any action.
Sure. Yeah, and I didn't mean so much at the meeting, but just when they come in, because
Madam
it feels awkward to not go back and say thank you. It's good to hear you. And relative to the SHPA letter, they asked 3 specific questions, and I know we don't do back and forth during a public comment, so I'm just hoping that there's a procedure where those questions can be answered to them.
And Griffin will answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Griffin, did you have something else you wanted to say?
What I was going to say was, so the administrative policy handbook you all adopted at the April meeting,
right?
It outlines this process, if you will. So what it explains is when letters are specifically asked to be shared with the township board and or directed to the township board, written to the township board, they are then automatically included in the next meeting packet. So that, I mean, you all have an opportunity to review that, or I'd be happy to bring it up, but it is in the administrative policy handbook.
Okay.
And if you all would like me to respond to one or more of these, I mean, just please give me that direction and I'm happy to do so.
Well, I think that the SHPAs do deserve answers to their questions about the fees and the deposit, the escrow deposit. And if you could answer those questions for the SHPAs, that would be very, very good.
Absolutely.
Also, possibly the Van Horn violations. I don't know how that's being responded to, but if you could speak to that too, Griffin, that'd be great.
What I can speak to is the video or image was shared with Lene and I, and we've already reached back out to Mr. Van Horn.
Okay.
I mean, in specific regard to letters, is there a response you would like?
Let's just talk about that during our next weekly meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, Cindy, when you say weekly meeting, you mean your weekly meeting between you and Manager Graham, correct?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
I knew that, but I just wanted to make that clear for our listeners.
Thank you. As soon as it was out of my mouth, I knew it was not correct. Any more questions about the correspondence? Okay, then we can move on to the next item. Okay, Griffin did a lot of work preparing the budget. During our supervisor manager meetings, who was in charge of preparing the budget, I think he did a very good job. I hope everybody had a chance to look at it, at least generally, maybe not down to the last line item. But I would like to see this budget adopted as a proposed budget and a tentative budget. So Griffin has the confidence to move forward and prepare the final draft of the budget. Unless there's some big changes that one of you has questions about or is concerned about. John?
Yeah, I have a question. When you say tentative, how do we want to deal with discussing certain items that have come up from board members that we'd like to see Manager Graham see if those items can be addressed in the current budget. We've all been very clear that no one wants to see any increase at all in spending in the next fiscal year. So then it comes back to, are there things in the budget now, or is there money somewhere that could be earmarked for any of these items that we've identified and discussed? And I've did a almost line by line review of the budget with Griffin. So I guess that's my question. Is that something we need to discuss now so that this is technically tentative? Because I'm not comfortable today adopting this budget until we get some feedback and an attempt to address some of these individual items.
I think if there's things that you would like our manager to look at between now and the next final budget.
Right.
This is just a tentative.
Okay.
It's not anywhere near the final. It's kind of like your final draft. It's still a
Sure.
draft. It's not
Right.
final. And we would have to look at it again next month.
Okay.
And that's when we would set the public hearing and
Right.
move
Because I don't
forward.
want to belabor that at this meeting, but I have submitted a list of items that I'd like to be looked into in terms of.
And you submitted that to Mr. Graham?
Yes. No.
Okay, so do we want to direct him to look at fitting those in?
Madam
Correct.
Supervisor, if I can make a comment,
Yes.
I think two important things. One, it would be extremely helpful for staff. We have received those requests, the items Treasurer Helmrich's referencing, to have that discussion here tonight so staff can have some more guidance from the board as a whole on how you all feel about those specific items. Additionally, you all are absolutely correct. Adopting a tentative budget does not mean that it cannot be that it can't be changed moving forward. All that would do is give staff the confidence to then schedule the public hearing for the next regularly scheduled meeting on June 10th and take the necessary steps to hold the public hearing and prepare for final adoption at that time.
Okay, why don't we start with John then and review each of the items that he's identified, if he has that list with him.
Griffin, do you have that slide?
I can pull it up.
Okay, that might be the easiest way. Okay, thank you. So these are various items that have come up in discussions over the last couple of months. And what I've done, because as I said, we are all extremely fiscally responsible, if not conservative. And this is not an attempt to make any additions to total spending. And it seems to me that the areas in blue are the ones that we probably, or certainly I would most like to see some addressing in the budget. I don't expect to see all of these things done. But those key areas are to do some maintenance and updating within the township hall. And then next to it, administrative support. This is a really key one. Right now, we have 16 hours a week in the office of an administrative person. And frankly, that is just not enough. This person handles permitting and filing and helps people like me who are in the office every day, and Griffin in particular, and Lori. They help deal with inquiries and people coming in. We all spend a lot of time doing non-duties of our role because of this. And as I said, having 2 out of 5 days covered, I find increasingly difficult. for the operation and the advancement of what we're all trying to do. And then the third one, tree planting, you know, just what, I don't know, sometime in 2018, the very large tree next to the office on the side where there's currently a picnic table was cut down. I don't know if it was diseased or dead. I just know it's gone. And to me, there's a glaring expanse there. There have been some really creative suggestions brought up that, you know, maybe we could just get a tree or a couple trees donated by a nursery. It even came up, maybe we dedicate one of the trees to perhaps Patricia Burkholz and seek donations. So I think that is something that could probably not even be a budget item if we just agree to make it a project to look into. And then I added at the bottom under other, because I'm hearing that these are really essential, and I don't have dollar amounts on this, but we have a very old, antiquated shredding machine that I'd say 2 out of every 3 times I try to shed something, it doesn't work. So I take it home to shred. And last year we had a massive cleanup of very old files from the basement that the clerk, Abby, and her deputy and others worked on, basically carting boxes and boxes and boxes to an off-site company to shred that we had to pay for. So this would certainly pay for itself, and we need it. The BSA on-site training, this is something too that we're very lucky. The BSNA system, and just so for those who don't know, BSNA are the names of the people that founded this company. This is the machine that runs probably 80, if not 90% of municipal governments in the state of Michigan. It's how we, all of our assessing is done through this database, our tax work, the cemetery work, all the budgeting, everything Griffin's done on the budget, all this is done through BSNA. And the good news here is we have a very high level contract with them. And it seems that there's a lot more that BSNA could be doing for us. It could be, I'm told, take on all the permitting. So it's not just, it's all done by paper now and files. And we have that access capability, but no one knows how to do it. So I think it would be worth our while to get some on-site training from BSNA so we actually know what tools are available to us that could help streamline all of our operation. And just as a reference, because somebody asked me, we currently paid, well, this fiscal year, we've paid $10,600 to BSNA for services and administration. And I think at that rate, I would like us to reach out to them and see how much they might be able to do for free. And if not, how much. But, you know, like I said, to have these tools at our disposal that we're paying for and that we're not using, let's start using them. Let's figure that out. And I would welcome any comments from others.
I think that's a good idea. You really do have the Cadillac BSNA system. And if you're not going to use it, then maybe we don't need to be paying for it anymore. Mm-hmm. But you can do all your permits. You can do everything almost paperlessly. I can do some training on the building department stuff and some of the assessing stuff. And they're all different modules created by different programmers, but they're all very similar. And once you're trained on one system, it really carries over to the others.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Cindy, who do you watch for the raised hands?
No, I don't see them. Only I think Griffin sees.
Oh, okay, just asking. I think these are great ideas, and as I understand, it's not going to add to the budget. On the BSNA training, first of all, it's one of the best softwares I've ever worked with in working in the educational and in fundraising for accounting. The system is great, but and I would be one of the ones that would definitely need some of the training. I think we have to wait, though, quite a while before we can have on-site training. I think this is something that should be tabled unless you want to, I'm trying to think, you probably want it in this budget, but I'm not picturing anything like this until quite a while, until we can have on-site training or people in the office, that kind of stuff. Anybody else have any opinions about that?
Well, I think that we're looking just for direction at this point if we want to put it in the budget. And we don't have to put it in this year's budget. We could maybe put it in next year's budget.
Okay.
And I think we should probably review each one of these items that John brought up and give Griffin some direction as to how he wants to move ahead with it. For example, painting, trim, and doors really is not a capital improvement. It's a maintenance item. And I don't know how much money he has left in the maintenance budget that might be available this year, or do we put it in next fiscal year? Or do we put it off until our next goals and goal setting and priority meeting? Because we really already have set him up with a pretty aggressive goals and objectives to get through this year. And he's doing great getting through them, but adding more does not make it any easier for him to accomplish what's already on his plate. So do we want him to look to add any of this information to our budget that's planned, or do we want to do it through our goals and priority setting?
Madam Supervisor, can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
So I think maybe on a positive note, a lot of these items are already going to be doable with how the budget's set up. And I'm happy to pull up the budget and walk you through line item detail if that's what you all would really like. But you know, a couple $100 for planting trees or pursuing donations, replacing a shredder, again, doing some basic painting and trim. Those are all things that are going to be built into an annual budget. I think the things that I could use some guidance on are items such as bathroom upgrades. I think bathroom upgrades are going to cost us thousands of dollars, as well as significant time planning and coordinating a project. So not only are we going to need to coordinate the timing issue of that, but also I would look for some guidance from you all on if you would like to add a project like that, where else in the budget are we going to start cutting money? Or increasing administrative support. So our administrative assistant is budgeted in the budget that's before you all in the packet at 2.5 days a week. If you all would like to increase that to 3, we're talking a couple $1,000s. Again, that's doable if you all would provide guidance on where you all would like to cut that money from elsewhere in the budget. BSNA on-site training. I've actually had conversations with that with BSNA in the past. And on-site training is not something that is available in our current, that's not part of our current package. It's an additional cost. Again, if that's something you all would like to see us explore, I'm happy to do so. But we do have a Cadillac plan when it comes to BSNA, but on-site training is not part of that. And the conversations I've had with them is most of the time, the only way to make on-site training cost effective is when you are a large organization and training 20, 25, 30 or more people. Bringing them in to train, as helpful as it would be 3 or 4, my recommendation would be we're going to be better off looking at the free trainings they offer and sending staff either to Bath for those trainings or to continue to do the best we can with scheduling personalized training via phone call.
So I'd like to comment on, yeah, it's John. I agree on the BSNA training because, I mean, as you know, they offer, I don't know what the status is now under the current situation, the trainings at their headquarters in Bath. They're not that expensive. We ended up attending fewer of those than we would like to have because of COVID-19 and other scheduling issues. So maybe it's a question of just getting a better schedule. I see their schedules for the tax training, but let's at least figure out when and where permit training maybe Cindy can help with that. But if we could identify what other trainings are there that we can avail ourselves of at a pretty low rate that they charge, it would be a step in the right direction. And of course, it's also tied in, I think, to the administrative support, because if we get additional hours, is that a new person or a separate person to what we have now? So it may, someone talked about timing. Yeah, I don't see this happening July, August, September, but I really think they're both key to have on our radar and know that we can do them when we figure out the right time for it.
Brenda has her hand up. And you're muted, Brenda.
I'm sorry, my dog was barking. Okay, so, you know, I like these ideas, but I was basing that on John saying we're not adding, it's not going to cost more. And here's my biggest concern about any costs at all. We know our revenue is going to be lower, correct?
Correct.
Post or during COVID. So I think we have to be really cautious. When we talked about the bathroom, I mean, of course it needs a full overhaul. We can't, excuse me, we cannot do that yet. But I can't even turn on the faucet, or I take two hands and I'm, you know. So I was thinking little, very little, not a huge project. Same for chair replacement, maybe repair the journalist chair. But I don't see how we can't really add. I mean, we did cut salaries overall when we rearranged the way the salaries work, when the supervisor's salary went down and we leveled off the officers' salaries. But I just, in this time, I would be reluctant to spend anything that is not already in the budget. So I assume, John, that there were places that you had found this money. Now, I would think for a $400 thing in the bathroom or something like that, painting, trim, again, as Cindy said, that is, I would think that's just maintenance.
And I think that's in this budget pack for maintenance.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I see those things is that this is just, we're sharing these with Griffin. I think he's right that the money's probably already there, and we're asking him to be aware of that and see if he can identify where that would be and when we might do it. And yes, our revenues are going to go down, but the other thing to remember, as I point out every month in the report, we run so tightly and so lean. You know, we're running under budget on expenses this year. I believe last year, I don't have it in front of me, I think we came in under budget on the expense side, and I don't see why that wouldn't happen again this year. And that's a good thing. I just want to throw that out there. And yes, we're not saying add this money, it's add these, if you want to call them priorities or whatever, just make sure they're on his radar and that he can come back to us when we vote finally that he feels confident that the items have made it in there. And again, I agree on with the anything within the hall, you know, whether it's upgrade, that's probably the wrong word, you know, whether it's painting, you know, we do that piecemeal. And I'd like to entrust him to say to us, you know, I think we could maybe do some trim painting in March, whatever. So that's my feeling on that.
And then
And yes, and Brenda, I want to mention, because someone had asked somebody, and it came back to me, but last year when we approved the fiscal year 2020 budget, we lowered total staff and independent contractor costs for the year by $27,000. That was an 8% improvement between consolidation and tweaking and making things more parity on staff. So that's not going to change.
Yeah. And then can I add one other thing? We have to keep in mind anything that we add takes staff time. So we also, I mean, I would be willing to volunteer some of my time to price some things out, whether it's the shredder or that kind of stuff. But I think we also have to be cognizant of staff time, and that's money as well.
Yep.
So
That's why we did our priority list.
right.
sure that we're not overloading the capacity of our manager to do his job.
Okay.
So I would say that as a tentative budget to be finalized, Griffin might be able to answer some of those questions when he presents the final budget next month. But as a tentative budget, I think it looks great.
It
And
does.
I want to add what I said last month too, just the incredible work that he has done on one of our top priorities, if not, I think it was number one, improve the formatting of the budget, make it readable, make it transparent, make it easy to understand. And he's just done an incredible job doing that.
He's done a fabulous job with that. And
I see no room for improvement there, and I don't know how he did it in such a short amount of time. Thank you.
Um, go ahead, Abby.
Griffin, I'm sorry, I know you're scrolling to something different. Could you possibly go back to the slide that we were on? I have some notes, but I want to make sure I don't miss anything. I'm sorry, I know this meeting is going to be long, so I'll try to go quick, but I really did look at John's, for lack of a better term, wish list, and I really appreciate him being thoughtful and putting that together, that these are things that are important. So I appreciate his time. The tree planting totally makes sense to me. It's inexpensive and it indicates, you know, our commitment to being green, or at least heading in that direction. The shredder, I really, really support that. We have a record retention schedule and we must destroy records at certain times. The chairs totally make sense to me because I think it's more of a health issue. We have chairs that are just falling apart. They're not, you know, they weren't made in a time when people were thinking about good posture and good body alignment or whatever. What doesn't make sense to me right now, I guess our township hall, when I look at it, everything needs to be replaced. It's really that old. It's really that rundown or antiquated, and it doesn't make sense. So to do any upgrades or even replacements, it doesn't make sense to me because we're going to have to look at that as a whole at some point. Let's see. I worry that website upgrades would be very expensive.
Yeah.
In addition to perhaps graphics work and MailChimp. Administrative support, I totally get that idea, but I think there's too many question marks right now with, and that may be our current administrative support. You know, I know she has talked about at some time cutting down on her hours or retiring. So there's that to think about. Let's see. And I think that's it. I just wanted to give my 2 cents because I did give this some time really to ponder all of these suggestions. Thanks for putting them together.
Of course, the ideal situation would be if we did move forward with the administrative support to find somebody who could do the website. And down the road, when we consider doing this, and as you spend more, you all know, when you spend more time in the office, you really do see the need. But, you know, down the road, that's something to consider, that if we found somebody that could do both, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Stacy had her hand up.
That's what I was going to say, Brenda. Now I've got nothing.
What's your mind?
Oh, I do have something. A little tidbit. The shredding, they use the paper out of the shredder in their burn building at the fire department. I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but maybe that's a way to get rid of all the paper too. So, but I was going to say too, I think it'd be smart if we have, if we get administrative support, someone with really, really strong computer skills that maybe could do some of that design work.
Any other questions or comments? Griffin, any questions?
No questions. Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. If I can, just before we move on, or before the board considers any action on this item, I did include an updated memo in the budget that highlights some of the changes from April to May. I think a few things to specifically draw your mind and your eye to are the pardon?
Sorry, that was my dog. I'm sorry.
Are the impacts of the coronavirus. as with almost, it seems, everything right now, COVID-19 has made budgeting extremely difficult because there's so much uncertainty moving forward. So I just really want to point out that staff has done the best we can to account for what we know, but please know that more than likely there are going to be amendments needed next year. So if it's with some of these specific items, or if it's just changes that are associated with the changing world right now, more than likely amendments are going to be necessary. So hopefully that adds a level of comfort moving forward with the budget. Additionally, included at the end of the budget document were some specific proposals provided by our engineering company, Prine and Newhoff. They add some specific detail to some of the larger engineering projects that are included in this budget. So if you all have specific questions about those or would like to go over those in more detail, I think they do a really good job of articulating those large complex projects that we would be starting this year. Other than that, I have no other comments about the budget. I'm happy to do what I can to answer questions. Other than that, though, I would remind you all that the action that's being sought at this meeting is to adopt a tentative budget and direct staff to schedule a public hearing for the June 10 regular meeting.
John?
Yeah, hi, Griffin, I just wanted to ask if, I hope this conversation has been helpful to you. Do you feel at this
Absolutely
juncture you want any more input, or?
Again, the only thing that would be helpful for me is if there's specific items you want added, we can discuss that more, but I'm happy to revisit that list again and see if there's any massaging of the budget we can do to include more of those.
Okay. No, I think that's the right process. We've given you this feedback. I think the priorities are kind of pretty clear and in unison. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
I'll move. Are you ready?
Motion?
Cindy?
Yeah.
I'll move to adopt the fiscal year 2020-2021 proposed budget as presented as the tentative budget and direct the township manager to schedule a public hearing to consider final budget adoption and the General Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2020-2021 as part of the regularly scheduled meeting of the Township Board on June 10, 2020.
I'll support that.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Bigford?
Yes?
Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Aldrich?
Yes.
Motion carries. Not sure what this item is, but let me take a look.
Madam Supervisor, there's no packet materials associated with this item.
Okay.
Treasurer John Helmrich asked that it be added, so I don't know if he has comments to make.
No, this was just, when in reviewing the minutes from last month, the board voted to direct staff to draft a short-term rental notice that we could post on the website and Facebook during the COVID situation. So I was just following up and asked if you have been able to do that.
Sure. So as directed, staff has included language about short-term rentals consistent with the governor's executive orders and information about how residents can report violations of those orders in the press release notices that have been posted on the township's website, sent out to mail on Facebook via MailChimp, the township's newsletter system. They've also been shared with the local newspaper. On Monday, the township distributed the 5th press release that also included specific language about short-term rentals and how residents can report concerns. All of those have been shared widely. If there's additional action the board would like taken, I'm happy to do what I can to help.
So I guess my question there, and the fact that, because your press releases and you're doing a great job with all that, but sometimes they contain so much information. I'm just wondering if something like this might need a separate notification as other municipalities have done. I'm just asking that question. Or if it could be posted on its own rather than part of a 5-part.
If I could just say, John, I think that industry is staying pretty much on top of that information as it's specifically included in the governor's executive order. And I don't think I've talked to any short-term rental property owners that don't know about that.
Okay, I have a question. We received a call in the office from someone out of state that had booked a reservation in the township that's prior to the 28th of May.
Yes.
And when they contact, I guess that's right. No, I did pass that on to you. I'm sorry.
And
I guess my question is, I'm just curious, was there any resolution or what's the process if that comes up? What happened was they refused a refund to this person and they called us to see,
yes,
can we help? Thank you.
And the answer, and I did speak with that resident as you asked, or excuse me, that individual as you asked, and the short answer is no. That's a business dealing between a private individual and a private company. The best that we can do is direct them to the Attorney General's office, who's hearing concerns of businesses potentially taking advantage of folks during the COVID-19 crisis. So, I mean, we can share information as we do, but directly, no, there is nothing we can do to help more.
Would there ever be a point though where, let's say there was more of these, is there anything we can do in terms of revoking a permit or not?
To speak broadly on that, that would be more involved at a code enforcement side, and I think the amount of time that staff would need to dedicate to enforce something like that would need to be another discussion.
Okay.
I think the short answer is it would be really difficult for us to revoke a license hearing concerns with that. I think the more appropriate route would be the private individual pursuing remedies, if that's through the courts or with the Attorney General.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we've covered that. So we'll proceed to the next item. The Tri-Community Joint Board Council meeting.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an update here because, you know, we had originally offered to the councils of Douglas and Saugatuck to hold this joint meeting. I think it was going to be last Wednesday or next Wednesday. And obviously because of the COVID-19 situation, that's not happening. One of the cities did suggest to me that we do it by Zoom anyway. And I don't know how people feel, but I don't think that would be appropriate, especially since when we pull this off, it'll be the first time. I thought a really interesting suggestion was made last week about maybe doing this, even though originally we wanted to avoid the summer because it's high season. Well, now we know we have a situation where if we'll be lucky if high season is like a mid-season or a low plus. So, and the SCA is unveiling a new outdoor area for performances, hopefully. So the idea was maybe we do a tri-community meeting outside at this new platform, help support the SCA and do something in mid-July. So I love that idea. Any thoughts on that before we perhaps reach out to the two cities?
For me, this is Brenda. For me personally, it just depends on where we're at with the COVID counts and that kind of.
Yeah, I don't know about me.
I'm not comfortable at this point, definitely. Might be by July, I don't know.
Okay.
Don't stop on my account, but I don't know if I can go, so.
I have no objections.
I think it's just a wait and see thing. And like everything else, it's so up in the air that it's hard to predict. Any other questions or comments about that? Then we can move on to the next item. That would be the master plan overview. Griffin or Lene, want to take it away?
I just would first like to introduce Lene if I can. I know you all have met her. For members of the public or who maybe haven't had an opportunity to join one of our meetings before, Lene Wells is the Township Zoning Administrator and Contract Planner. She brings a lot of experience to our organization. We're very fortunate to have her as part of the Township team. She's been spending a lot of work over the last month reviewing the master plan and preparing some summary comments and recommendations, potential next steps for the Township Board. So I'm really pleased to give the floor to Lene Wells.
Thank you, Griffin. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see familiar faces and be here this evening. And I feel like there's a lot of, alignment, not for, I think it's a pretty good word, but alignment with the presentation from Ryan, also some of what we heard from Elizabeth today as well. And I guess before I get started, I just wanted to comment a little bit on some of what Elizabeth was saying and some of the suggestions and things I heard about, rebalancing some street spaces and how our commercial areas really need to start accommodating more areas for people to wait, pick up food, dine outside. I'm actually from Hinsdale, Illinois, that Mr. Waringa mentioned. And I've been attending a lot of webinars about these transitions to do more social streets and community spaces. And I'd be happy to kind of volunteer some time and effort towards that. So I just wanted to put that out there before we started. As to the master plan, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to take some time with that document, and also thank the board for recognizing its importance. The master plan is a guiding document. It sets forth goals and policies for the township to realize through mostly one of our biggest tools is the zoning ordinance, because the zoning ordinance really governs what we do with land and the rights that we afford to property owners when it comes to development. So the master plan is a visionary document. It was developed over the course of several community input meetings, several community surveys, certainly a wealth of knowledge that came from township residents and officials. And that master plan was originally developed back in the 80s, but it has been, of course, refreshed, reanalyzed. New demographic data has been taken into account, and the most recent plan amendment was done in 2016. Every 5 years, the state requires that the township review its master plan. It doesn't mean that it has to change the master plan, but it does require that it be reviewed by the township board and preferably the planning commission. A lot of times I've seen townships take a look at their master plan on an annual basis. It's a tool for goal setting. It's a tool for capital improvement planning. It's a tool for the planning commission to decide on kind of bigger, broader topics that they might want to work on, in addition to being responsive to the more action-oriented planning where they're responding to development requests. So that kind of lays the framework for the master plan. I did review the 2016 version of that master plan, and there is a memorandum in your packet. I do want to acknowledge that I am new to the township, and Griffin, thanks for kind of welcoming me here. And I do apologize that the video was not working at the Planning Commission or ZBA meeting, but I'm happy to be here tonight in person. I've been a planner in West Michigan for 16 years. I've worked in lakeshore communities kind of up and down the coast, from down in Lincoln Township, New Buffalo, all the way up to Harbor Springs. Abby, I think you mentioned lakeshore communities and looking for more rural examples with housing that Ryan brought up. And I have one I want to share with you at some point. So remind me and we can work on that. But when we look at your tri-community plan, I wanted to include the overarching goal of that document. And it's really about quality of life and preserving small town and rural character. And that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And it also speaks to sustainable development and how we think about future generations. And then the plan is organized into various topic areas. And so I took some time to look at the goal and the policies of each one of those topic areas. And I offer just my experience. Certainly this is something that you can question of me. I'm sure there are things that we can add to this, but I thought that it provided you a good overview of some of the observations that I've had, again, in my short 12 months, but ways that we can maybe try to operationalize some of the remaining policies that haven't yet been achieved. I do want to commend the Planning Commission, the Township Board, yourselves, and previous leadership, because there have been many implementation steps taken for this master plan, but there are several that are yet to come that I really think the time is right, especially if we have, if we see maybe a lull in some of the development requests, that there could be time allocated to working towards some of the short, medium, and long-term action items that are included in this memo. I didn't think I was going to go through it kind of page by page or section by section, but I'm happy to do that if you'd like. Or I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can just kind of focus on those action steps. Cindy, I'll kind of take the direction from you and from the board, how you would like me to proceed.
Well, I think the 5-year plan as it's laid out in your memo is excellent. I'm very pleased that you did this work, and I'm not sure there's going to be a lull in the development. And in another life, I take those calls. So I'm really pleased with what you've put together for the master plan. And probably I've looked at it at least once a month.
Yeah.
So
I can just speak to maybe the short-term items, if you.
That would be good.
Okay. The first one that we've observed, and I know many of you who've been in the office have taken calls about property maintenance and code enforcement items. This has been something that we've identified as a priority kind of from day one, but it definitely takes a lot of effort, organization, focus, and we have that internally, but it is labor intensive in that there's often a site visit, there's documentation, there are return visits to determine whether compliance has been achieved. There's ticketing, there's, and eventually it could go to court. So it is a activity that does need to be considered carefully. We've been doing kind of, I would say, a base level. We've had some successes cleaning up some properties, but there are certainly others where we've had repeat offenses. We've had property owners that have not made any effort to clean their property or fix whatever the enforcement matter is. So we do think that that is something that our residents do, you know, deserve to have their neighbors and others, you know, abide by the same codes and ordinances as they do. And so that enforcement is important. Number two, this is related to a lot of what Ryan had mentioned. And, you know, I think I've spent a lot of time reflecting on zoning in general post-COVID, and some of the processes that we have that can add considerable costs to the applicant. So I think that there could be an opportunity to look at some of our sort of streamlining, especially when it comes to housing or the type of development that we do desire to have in the township. I also think we do need to look at some of our rules, especially for housing. Our minimum unit size is 1,000 square feet. When I've done some research on new construction rates, they range, as Ryan even said, from $150 to $175 a square foot. That does not include the land. So if we're requiring 100,000 square feet, that house begins at $150,000, $175,000. So I think we can take a look at some of our minimums. I've also looked at our zoning ordinance and those dimensional standards that Ryan mentioned. And we have 150-foot minimums for frontages. That was one of the examples he shared. Our minimum lot size for some of our residential is, our lowest is 40,000 square feet. That's 1 acre. And then it goes up from there. The other thing that I think, in addition to just residential, is how are we creating a business-friendly environment from a zoning standpoint and a use standpoint? Our C1 district, which is a lot of our Blue Star Highway, has a minimum lot size of 2 acres and 200 feet of frontage. And so that spaces out our commercial, which is fine in places, but if we're trying to create more of a walkable clustering node or provide more economically feasible land use patterns for maybe startup and new businesses, we might want to take a look at what those dimensional standards are. We also might want to look at some of the uses that we allow in the various districts. And I talked about this in some of the sections related to industrial development and economic development, even social services and healthcare. I think a lot of our uses like hospitals or medical, sometimes we treat them as special uses, and that might just be another step, another kind of costly process thing that we could look to scale back if we want to welcome those in certain locations in the community. Item C, related to sidewalk and pathway. It's so great that we have the Blue Star Trail. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm a big supporter of multimodal connections and features in a community. I think people want to have choices about the way they move around. And I think it will be really important for us to think about how we in the township connect into the Blue Star Trail. So where are we linking parks? Where are we linking clusters and nodes of residential? Where are we linking uses on one side of Blue Star Highway with the side that has the trail? So I really do think that as we see more and more people using our parks and our recreational facilities, more and more people who want to take a walk and be 6 feet apart, that trail system is such an important asset, and we should be finding safe ways for people to access it. And then item D, this is a little bit of a soapbox, I guess, or maybe some of item C was as well, but I do a lot of study when it comes to planning and zoning and follow a lot of podcasts, and I'm always training myself and trying to become better at what I do. And one of those podcasts and movements, it's really a movement, is called Strong Towns. And Strong Towns was started by Chuck Marone. He's an engineer by trade, and realized in his career that municipalities really should be considering the long-term financial impact of infrastructure investments. It's great when development kind of pays its way at the beginning. They put the roads in, they do the utility extensions, but in 20 years, those need repair. They need upgrades. And those repairs often fall on the backs of those future generations. And I'm in favor of growth. I'm in favor of our community embracing change. But I do think that the Strong Towns podcast, there's a book he recently put out called Strong Towns, A Bottom-Up Revolution. His fireside chats and any resources through Strong Towns, I highly recommend as just independent study for you as township board members and even planning commissioners. So those were kind of the things for the short term. And then hitting on the medium term, a couple things just real quickly. To the point about the joint community meeting, I think that that's a great idea. And in the master plan, there's a suggestion for a joint planning commission or review of site plans by maybe the city of the village of Douglas and the township when, say, a project is at the border of that jurisdictional boundary. And while I do think collaboration is absolutely important, I am a little concerned about staff resources for those types of joint planning reviews. But what I was thinking is that we could explore the idea of maybe a quarterly planning meeting where the planners, maybe the manager, the chairperson of the planning commissions, and the council or township liaison from township board liaison with the planning commission could take part in these quarterly meetings to talk about more big picture items, land use, maybe some of this mobility conversation, maybe some of the Strong Towns topics, I mean, whatever it might be, that maybe it's more of a gathering every quarter versus having each jurisdiction review development requests. Conducting the audit, that's sort of similar to that attainable housing issue, but I do think there are other things in the zoning ordinance that need some finessing. And I think a full audit would be helpful. That would probably lead to an amendment or a series of amendments to the zoning ordinance. I mentioned earlier the entitlement or permitting process. There are some things that we do and we require, which maybe we could look at streamlining, again, in the name of economic development and helping our business community. And then I think the other ones are just kind of self-explanatory, but again, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to speak with you today and to share some insights and to continue to work on behalf of the Township Board, the Planning Commission, staff, and others to uphold what's in this document and continue to be of service.
Thank you, Lene.
Thank you.
Any questions for Lene? Again, this is a 5-year plan. It's not something we have to do tomorrow and get it on the next month's agenda. But John?
Hi, it's John here, Lene. I just want to rave about this effort. I think this document is incredible. It's something that has been needed and due in the township for a long time, and I love it. I'm glad you mentioned, one thing I was going to maybe suggest, if in next steps we could add an E item. I've mentioned this to you already. The Michigan Association of Planning encourages an annual joint meeting of township boards and their planning commission together to review the plan and make sure, to the extent they can, that they're adhering to it and discuss priorities. And that's something I'd love to see happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the list is incredible. Can I ask a couple questions that are detailed? Maybe, whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Help me here. I'm going to show my ignorance. in community character, when you're talking about tree preservation, which I applaud that highly. I don't know what caliper means there.
Oh, yeah, that is the diameter. Sorry, I'm
Okay.
sorry about the jargon, but it's the diameter of the tree, right? So the larger caliper trees, some ordinances might say if you remove a tree, you have to replace a tree.
Right.
Well, that's great, but you're not getting a 1-for-1 there, right? Maybe you're removing more of an old growth, larger caliper oak,
Right.
and replacing it with a 2.5 caliper maple. So some ordinances actually say if your caliper that's being removed is over a certain size, then you actually have to replant with even a larger caliper tree or more smaller caliper tree.
Cool. I learned something today. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've heard the word used in other ways, but that's good to know. I'm just going to throw this out. I don't know if this is necessary. I don't know if I'm requesting a addition, but in economic development, when you talk about small workshops, storage buildings, et cetera, something that is very dear to me that I'd love to see maybe in here and addressed at some point by you and the Planning Commission is the potential or possibility for solar farms, solar energy farms.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Abby?
Sure. This was really exciting to read. Some of our board materials in our packet aren't always so exciting, and this was just really fun to consider all of these suggestions. I'm just really impressed with all the suggested improvements. They just seem so innovative and efficient, and they fill in a lot of gaps and holes in the plan. So I just really wanted to thank you. And I had made some notes and highlighted some things, but those I think I can either ask you about personally or at a different time. So thank you for your work on this. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Brenda, do you have any comments or questions?
No, but as Abby just said, thank you very much for your work on this. It's great.
Thank you.
Stacy? Stacy still with us?
Yes.
Really enjoyed reading this, and I'm excited to implement some of these suggestions. And I think we're ready. We're ready to roll. We're getting it all together, and I'm excited about the next few years in the township. I think we're going to do some great things. So thank you, and I'm so glad you're in the team. I really am. You're doing a great job.
Thank you for all your support.
Hey, Lynn, I have one more question, please. In reference to conducting a zoning ordinance audit, which I think is amazingly important and a great priority, is that something that you would do, or would this require any outside assistance?
Oh, I've certainly done zoning ordinance audits before. When I spent 15 years with Williams & Works running that planning department, and I did plenty of zoning ordinances. I've written several, I've audited several. I could help with that. Certainly there's not an expectation that work would be given to me, but I am happy to do that, of course.
Okay, thank you.
We have a
oh yeah
from someone in a chat. In addition to solar farms, consider taking actions to help homeowners tighten up their envelopes, insulation, and such. It's on a message here.
Who's speaking, please?
Oh, Stacy.
Oh, okay.
I was just reading, someone put a chat message about this, so I just read what they said.
Thank you. I will note that. Tighten up their envelopes, insulation and stuff.
Cool.
I was suggesting if the board is inclined, I do think that this memo, it would be beneficial to share with the Planning Commission, and they would likely have some other additions as we talked about today. You know, John had a few, the comment we received as well via the chat. So I was thinking it might be beneficial if the board accepted this overview of the master plan and directed staff to share with your comments, share it with the Planning Commission for review as well. We could include it on their next agenda at the end of June.
I think
couldn't
that's a
agree
very,
more.
very good idea.
Yep.
Well,
Can I
I'm
make a motion?
happy.
Oh, sorry.
I'm happy to move to accept this as information and direct staff to share this memorandum and the board's comments with the Planning Commission for their confirmation review and comment as part of the 5-year master plan review process.
I have a motion by Bigford. Do I have support?
I'll support.
Support by Helmrich. I will call the roll. Bigford,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Aldrich.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
And we can move on to our next item.
Okay, this is also my item, so I will just keep the ball rolling if that's okay. And again, the caveat here is that I'm very new when it comes to wellhead protection. That was always one of those buckets that the engineering team focused on. So I was happy to be able to dive into this a little bit. But I certainly know that there's been a lot of work prior to my involvement with collaborations with the working group made up of Cal Lake, the City of Saugatuck, the City of the Village of Douglas, the engineering firm for Cal Lake. So I'm sort of one of the last people to get my eyes on it, but essentially the document I've provided just an overview, very cursory review, because again, I feel like it does need some additional review by others and conversation. But the wellhead protection and groundwater protection ordinance that I reviewed was the one adopted or drafted by the City of Saugatuck. And what I wanted you to know is that I believe those are general law ordinances, so it's outside of our zoning. So it's a general law ordinance that does regulate land use, and it also requires certain processes be followed to minimize and mitigate potential contamination of groundwater resources in areas that are near wellheads. The model ordinance that Saugatuck has adopted, it prohibits certain uses in wellhead protection areas, and that map is in your packet. I think it's important just to consider that, because that area is quite a significant geography in the township. And the uses that would be prohibited are listed here in the memo. So in addition to prohibiting those types of uses, obviously because of some of their effects that they could have on our water resources, the ordinance does have a way to allow variances from those prohibitions. You can also make a case to allow it. It does have a provision in the ordinance that inoperable vehicles, depending on the length of time that they're kept on a property within that wellhead protection area, there are certain requirements for handling and removing fluids and liquids and hazardous wastes that might be associated with those various types of vehicles. And after reviewing it, I was feeling like it would be helpful to kind of reconvene that team, talk through enforcement of this ordinance, right? Like, and grandfathering. So how would adopting this ordinance affect uses that we have today that might be prohibited in the future. So I think that's a conversation. And then I also think we need to think about how this integrates with our zoning ordinance, because it's always helpful if there's a little bit of cross-referencing, not so much as if you amend one, you have to amend the other, but I think it's important for people who might be reading the zoning ordinance and perhaps their property is within the wellhead protection area, that there's some kind of alert to them in the ordinance language, but also whether we want to include that boundary in our zoning map, for example. So a few things that I think need to be thought through before there's any action. And so I was thinking it might be helpful to just consider this as information. We could always reconvene that group. Staff could have more conversations and maybe learn a little bit more from the city of Saugatuck. I know, Cindy, I was a little late in calling you. I was so focused on the master plan work, but I'd certainly be happy to learn more about your experience in your other life, and also the experience of the city of the Village of Douglas.
Yeah, I would just like to say that when Carol Lake was putting the pressure on one of the tri-communities to develop a wellhead ordinance or a wellhead protection area ordinance, they were in the midst of applying for a grant, and they needed at least one of the tri-communities to have a wellhead ordinance. And since of all the areas, Saugatuck is pretty much built out, and it was easy to do, easy to address. We went ahead and proceeded with parts of the ordinance that they provided to us. Since then, it looks like some of that grant money is going to dry up, and Cal Lake is not in such a big hurry to get this done. So I would think it would be really appropriate to shelve this for maybe 6 to 12 months and then pull it out again. I think it's important. Groundwater protection is very important, but it just adds another layer of enforcement tools that you can use if there's a violation. And with the rural character and the not rural character, it's a bigger deal for the township than it ever was for the city. I mean, it's a lot more work, and you've got agricultural stuff going on, and you've got residential developments going on, and you might have a gas station or some of the things that are more challenging to deal with than the city. City has no agricultural, one industrial parcel. So I think it would be really appropriate to shelve this for the time being so we can work on the stuff that's really pressing, because this is no longer that pressing. Any other comments or questions? Lene?
No.
John?
Well, I guess thank you for that insight that you bring to this, Cindy. That's extremely helpful, and I think I remember you going through that with me earlier. But and again, also thank you, Lene, because I'm one of those people. I've never quite had my hands around what wellhead protection meant, and I have a much better idea now. Thank you for this work. I'm just curious what your reaction is if we were to do the table this for 6 months.
Mine personally, I'm indifferent.
Okay.
I do recognize there's a lot happening right now, and other pressing matters. I know that it's always hard, priorities always shift, but I take the direction of the board.
Abby, do you have any comments or questions or concerns? Did you get a chance to look at the wellhead protection area map?
I did. And And like John, this was very educational for me. I really learned a lot about what it really means and what it takes to execute. But I do share with your concerns about enforceability and just capacity right now. So I'm kind of torn because it's very important work that needs to be done, but
And there's other laws that address this, state laws that address some of this enforcement stuff. So it's not like that we don't have any tools, but this would just put another layer on top. Stacy, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
And I'm missing somebody. Brenda.
No, in this case, even though I've attended some of the wellhead meetings, it is very complex, and I defer to the subject matter experts, and that would be Lene, particularly, and also Cindy. So.
And if you want to learn more about the wellhead protection areas and the wellhead protection plan, Cal Lake does have a whole entire plan on their website that you can read about why it is, what the intention is, and how they determine the areas. So it's kind of a boring read, but it's got pictures.
Madam Supervisor, may I make a comment?
Yes, please.
My comment's very brief, and it's just, I think it would be very appropriate for the board to table this for the time being. Alternatively, my only suggestion would be, please understand that what staff is looking for is just direction, understanding the time crunch we're in and the limited amount of resources, both financial and staff time that our organization has. We wanted to do our due diligence in reviewing this ordinance for you all, as it was a goal adopted in the Township Board's 2020 goals. But we got to a point where significant more staff time, working with an attorney, working with an engineer, which again obviously requires financial resources, is going to be needed to be able to move this further and bring you all a recommendation that staff's comfortable with. So that's really why we are bringing this to you all for some guidance on where you would like us to go from here. We're more than happy to continue to work on it. In that case, just please recognize the time and money that it's going to take to get it to the point to be ready for recommendation. But it would also be very appropriate if you all would like to table this for the time being. It's completely a decision that's up to the board.
Thank you, Griffin. I think everybody knows my opinion. Maybe we could go back to the PowerPoint slide and look at that proposed.
Sure. The proposed motion's actually right here. The motion on the slide is wrong.
Okay.
So the proposed motion was right here. If you all would like to do an alternative motion, which would be to table it, you could just simply motion to table it. You could motion to table it for a specific period of time to be brought back up, or really anything else you all would see as appropriate.
So 6, 12 months, or indefinite.
And if you motion to table it, just table it and don't add a timestamp to it. Really, at any point, you can give staff the direction to bring it back up.
Well, I'd like to make a motion. I move that we table the consideration of a wellhead protection ordinance for this report until a future date to be determined by the board and staff.
Okay, we have a motion by Helmrich.
I'll support.
Support by Marcy.
Yes.
I will take a roll call. Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Aldrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
sorry, yes?
Okay, motion carries, unanimous. And we can move on to our next item.
Okay. Thank you for your time tonight, Lene.
Thanks, Lene.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything.
The assessing service agreement. That contract we have with the Appraisals Plus group is expiring, and Griffin has negotiated a 2-year agreement with an addition that the assessor will attend the Board of Review meetings. I read it. He was able to keep, he was able to keep the same cost that we have had. So, Griffin?
Thank you. I keep my comments really brief. I think one of the most important comments to make is I'm really excited to present you all a renewal which would keep Kyle Harris as part of our team. Kyle, just like myself and Lene, is getting close to finishing his first year with the township, and is continuing to learn our organization as we all are, and is an important part of our team. So I am pleased to be able to present you a renewal that keeps him part of this team. As Cindy mentioned, really the notable changes are I'm proposing a 2-year agreement as opposed to a 1-year agreement. That's at the request of the contractor. It gives them some stability as well as gives us some stability in this uncertain economic time. And as opposed to the original agreement, the assessor will be contractually required to attend all Board of Review meetings. Those occur in December, July, and March. And lastly, as Cindy mentioned, the cost remains consistent with this year's costs, which is extremely helpful for us budgeting-wise moving forward. There is a proposed motion there. Please do recognize that there are 2 agreements. There's the contract with Appraisals Plus Group and a separate contract with Kyle Harris to be the township's assessor. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
John, any questions?
No, I have a comment, Griffin. I just want to underscore and thank you for the improvement of the, including the coverage of Board of Review meetings, because that's so important on so many levels, and I thank you for that.
Brenda, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I do not.
Abby?
No.
And Stacy?
Thanks for negotiating the price too. That's a plus, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any motions?
I move to approve the adoption of the proposed assessing services agreement with Appraisals Plus Group, LLC, and the employment contract with Kyle Harris for the term of May 15, 2020 through May 14, 2022 as presented, and authorize the township manager and township clerk to sign them as applicable.
Okay, we have a motion by Aldridge. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Bigford. I'll call the roll. Aldridge?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Motion carries. And our next item, please. This is our employee health insurance renewal. I've had a chance to review this in some detail, and I would think that continuing with our current plan design is really appropriate. One of the draws for people to work as public servants are the benefits, because the pay is not always that great, what they could get in the public sector. So that would be my suggestion. I'm looking for any comments or questions. Griffin, did you want to review it a little bit?
Please, if I can, I'll keep it brief. This is probably getting in to some of the material Abby referenced that's not quite as exciting. But so I'll try to keep it really brief. I think you can see here on the slide, employee health insurance for the township is really broken down into 3 separate categories. The one I'm going to focus on, it's the one that impacts the most people, but also is the largest expense for the township, is our priority health insurance plan. If you all had a chance to look at the materials in your packet, there is a proposal that was prepared by Lifehouse Group, which is the township's health insurance agent, and they explored a number of different options for the township. They recommended, and staff also recommends, sticking with the current plan, which is this option 1. But I do want you to know that we explored other options as well, and there are other options available for the township that would have the potential to save us money. That's not what I'm recommending right now, but I think it's important for you to all know that if the township ever was in a position that we needed to make a change, that there are options available for us. So unless there are any other questions, I'm happy to work through some of the details of this proposal. But I can also tell you that, staff spent significant time working with Lighthouse Group, our insurance agent, to review those, and I am comfortable making this recommendation to you all.
Any other questions, John?
The only question I have, and if it's not appropriate, just tell me. I'm just curious who's on the Medicare Advantage plan.
That would be Al Ellingson and his spouse.
That's right. No, I remember that. Thank you for.
And that's that's an agreement that was worked out with them many years ago.
Yep. I remember discussing that. So sorry I asked again.
Nope.
Brenda, any questions or concerns or comments?
No, I was, as I read through this, I do find this stuff pretty interesting. I just was, it was surprising how close most of the quotes were. There's not that much divergence in pricing. And so I see no reason to change it as long as staff is happy with it. So.
Okay. Abby, any questions, comments, concerns?
No.
Who am I missing? Stacy?
Nope.
Did I give everybody a chance to speak? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to continue with the current plan designs and authorize the township manager to sign the necessary decision forms associated with renewing the priority health plan, Medicare Advantage plan, and pediatric dental plan as prepared by Lighthouse Group for fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
Motion by Marcy, any support?
I'll support that.
Stacy, I think, beat you to it. So I'll call the roll. Marcy?
Yes.
Osman? Yes. Aldrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Elmrick?
Yes.
Motion carries, unanimous. So we can move on to the next insurance exciting document. This item I did not review as closely as I did the health insurance, but I did have an opportunity to talk with Griffin about it, and he seems quite pleased with the proposal. Griffin, do you have any additional comments?
The biggest addition I would make, and it's noted here on the slide, so the township would be absorbing approximately a 7.5% increase. And I think, as you all would expect, that was one of the questions I asked in my meetings with our insurance providers is, why is there such an increase? And beyond the industry standard and inflation costs that we see, one of the other reasons is the township's loss ratio for our insurance company is 194% as compared to their average municipal client, which is 30%. And that's largely given to the township's past claims. I think that's just noteworthy just to see we're a money loser for insurance companies at this point in time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely an asset of the township, and something that we can say is the insurance company EMC has stood behind us, and that's something we should absolutely recognize. I was very impressed with my meeting with their representative, as well as Bob Brock, who works with Butin and Associates and has worked with the township, I think, for 15 or more years on helping them with their property and liability and workers' compensation insurances. But it is noteworthy, at least for the board, to understand the position we're in with our insurance companies. Again, obviously not something to live in fear, but we should take that into account in the decisions we make, that you know, for every dollar we contribute to the insurance company, they're spending $1.94, where on average it's someone contributes $1 and the insurance company pays 30 cents. So just recognizing that difference, I think, is something noteworthy for you all.
Okay, let's take any comments or questions. John?
Yeah, Griffin, thank you for pointing that out. I think that's it's a good reminder. A year ago, when the insurance was all up for renewal, Brenda and I were appointed to be a committee to handle that because we didn't have a manager at the time. And I just want to underscore that Bob Brock and EMC, not only last year, but they have continued to be so supportive to us and reaching out. And I applaud you for maintaining that relationship and having this renewal in front of us. I do have a question. I don't know if you might know the answer to this, because this loss ratio came up. It was a big scare a year ago because it held up one of the renewals because the state has a criteria and they had mandated that one of the policies like quadruple. It all got worked out, but it was kind of, like I said, it was very scary for a couple of weeks. And that's when I first got an understanding of loss ratio. So my question, long-winded introduction to the question is, do you know, because there was no claims last year, correct? This year?
No, we have an ongoing claim. The Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance lost.
But I meant there was no new claim.
Correct, no new claims.
And the previous year, I believe there was only one. So will this loss ratio, do we know when it will come down? Will it not change until that's resolved? Or
my understanding is it is based on ongoing claims as well as past claim history. I don't have a more specific answer at this time, except I think you all are even more familiar with it than I am, that the township has a rich history of insurance claims.
Okay, so we'll just watch that, see if that
absolutely
changes next year or not.
Sure, absolutely. It's just as an FYI for you all. I think it's something to notice. And when you mentioned some confusion from last year, I think that was specifically in regard to the workers' compensation. And I think you played a large role in correcting that with Mr. Brock. And that's been corrected.
He and his staff. I mean, because it was, like I said, it was very scary for a few weeks because
correct.
It was holding up renewal.
Sure. Yep. And
not to mention the budget impact. So
absolutely,
they're all very supportive. Can you speak to a little bit to? Are you comfortable? Are you pleased with the addition of some cybersecurity protection here? And
so after talking with them a little bit more, I know the conversation that I'd had with them in the past was specifically along the lines of ransomware attacks and how we would be protected if something like that came along. They walked me through kind of some scenarios and how our current coverage would be appropriate moving forward. The short answer to you all is you don't need insurance. Well, I don't want to say you don't need. There's more than one way to address ransomware attacks. One of them is you pay the ransom. Insurance companies don't tend to cover that and try to avoid that. What EMC talks about is, for example, if the township was ever to get a ransomware attack, we would literally unplug all of our technology equipment and start from scratch, and the insurance company would replace all of it, hardware, software. We get the backups back in. Like, that would actually be, in their mind, the more cost-effective route. So we talked through some of those scenarios. They're still going to work on some quotes for us if we were to increase our cybersecurity protection. And I think, when we receive those, staff will evaluate those and make any necessary recommendations to the board. But I am comfortable moving forward with this policy at this time.
And so with the renewals as you're presenting tonight, there's some degree of increase on the cyber side?
No,
Or
that's consistent with past
what we have?
insurance.
Okay. But you've clarified what that covers.
Yeah, I clarified that we would be covered in the event of some of those instances, and they are still going to work on some additional quotes for us that we
Okay.
could consider moving forward.
All right, great. No, it'd be good to see those when they come in. Thank you.
Brenda, any questions or comments?
No.
Abby? Questions or comments?
No.
Stacy?
No.
Then I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that we continue with the current plan designs and authorize the township manager to sign the necessary decision forms associated with renewing the EMC Insurance Company property and liability insurance policy and accident fund, workers' compensations insurance policy as prepared by Buiton and Associates LLC for fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
Any support?
I'll support.
Supported by Marcy. I'll call the roll. Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Aldrich,
Yes.
Bigford.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. And we're ready to move on to the next item. A very complicated item. Something that we've done before and really had no controversial issues with it. Is there anybody that might have a question or a comment, John?
No, because as you said, we've done this at least once, if not twice in the last year.
Marcy? Comments or questions?
No, we have done it before, right?
Abby?
No.
Stacy? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the purchase of 9 cemetery grave plots from Barbara Miles in the amount of $120 per grave plot, which totals the cost of $1,080 and no cents.
Okay, is there a support?
I'll support.
Supported by Marcy. I'll call the roll. Aldrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Motion carries unanimously, and we're ready to move on. I'm going to turn this one over to Griffin because I've got to get up and turn on the lights. It's getting dark in here.
Yeah.
Thank you. As you can see from the memo in front of you, it's really an overview of the no-wake buoys in the township. This has kind of been a reoccurring issue, as you all are aware, over the last year. So I've been working with some of our area partners to try to make this a more consistent process moving forward. And in that, what we discovered was the current equipment we have is old and really past its useful life. The contractor who installed them and removed them for us last year explained to me when he pulled them from the river, they were 80% under the water. And based on his professional judgment, he doesn't think they'll make it through another year, which brings us to the point that we need to purchase new equipment associated with the no-wake buoys. So staff is proposing a budget amendment which would allow us to move forward with that. However, I also bring this to you all for discussion if you all would like to discuss if there's an alternative to this. I spoke with Sergeant Wagner, who is the head of the Allegan County Sheriff's Office Marine Unit earlier today or yesterday. Excuse me, I don't exactly remember. Actually, believe me, it was yesterday. And it talked about how the township originally formed this no-wake district in 1996. And with that, we are then responsible for marking the no-wake district for it to be enforceable. The township can decide not to install buoys, but then the no-wake district is not enforceable. Over the past, I guess it would be almost 25 years, a number of parties have really done it for the township. The sheriff's office did it for a while. My understanding is Mr. R.J. Peterson coordinated that for the township for a while, and other folks. And really starting last year, the townships had to take that on and really needs to be responsible for the costs associated with this service if it's something the township board would like to continue to do. So in the short term, staff's recommendation is for the board to make a budget amendment to allow us to purchase updated equipment, and we'll work to get those installed moving forward. But also in the longer term, I would suggest thinking a little bit more about, is this a service we want to continue to provide? And if so, is funding it through our general fund really the most appropriate use of that money? I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. Otherwise, a suggested motion is available on the slide.
And I understand, Griffin, that money would come from the cleanup day that was canceled. So it's just a transfer from
Absolutely
to the buoy purchase. So it's
absolutely
not a wash.
Absolutely. And I think we can look at this almost as a trying to make lemonade out of lemons situation. I'll give a little bit more of an update later, but as you all are aware, the township needed to make the difficult decision to cancel Spring Cleanup Day 2020, which saves the township approximately $1,500. So we would really just be reappropriating that money for use this year.
Did they say what the lifespan of buoys is? Were these the ones from 1960 or whatever you said, or?
I don't believe so, but no, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
I have a question. When you talk about discontinuing the service, does that mean no buoys would be placed?
It could. I think another option would be to look at alternative ways to fund that service.
Okay.
Abby, any questions?
I appreciate you using the lemons to lemonade analogy, but the cleanup day benefits everybody in the township. This benefits just a select few. And I think we really need to look at it. Look at what other jurisdictions are doing. Are other townships and municipalities paying for this service? I kind of struggle with purchasing new ones and then committing to that, putting them in and taking them out cost every year when it really benefits only a small portion of our constituents.
So I can tell you through conversations with the managers for Saugatuck and Douglas, they both provide these services as well. I think they have some similar concerns. I obviously can't speak for them I can't speak for them, but I think everyone is looking at this. I think the challenge we're in right now is we want to get these buoys in more than likely in the next couple weeks. And my understanding is the current equipment we have is no longer viable. So if the board would like to wait, that's all of your decision, and we can further explore this. But I think we need to understand that more than likely is going to mean buoys aren't getting in the water anytime soon.
I would add that it may be a small group, but because the water levels are so high, the erosion is one of the biggest factors. So all the property that's in this area, and I'm terrible with maps, so I'm trying to figure out exactly what this is. Because of the water levels, I think it's even more important. And I was wondering if the city voted to make the entire river in their area no wake. There's lots of things that go along with it, but for the township area, the erosion is a huge issue, especially when the water is this high.
And
so,
Abby, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Abby, one of the potential solutions I've been thinking about, and it is a fair point that you mentioned, is there's a limited amount of property owners who directly benefit from that no wake district. So something the township could do moving forward is look at potentially creating a special assessment district and having those individuals who are directly benefiting pay for the service moving forward. I think the difficult position the township is in is none of that happens fast. And like many of the challenges we've got the longer term solutions and issues, but we've also got the situation directly in front of us is the board needs to decide if we want to put buoys in the water this year.
If we don't put them in, is that a wake zone then? I mean, you can't put a sign up, no wake zone?
If we do not put the buoys in, it's not enforceable. And if you all remember when I started last year, I mean, this was really one of the first challenges you all tasked me with dealing with was getting the buoys in the water because they weren't in. And we were getting lit up with phone calls and emails and so on and so forth. So again, if the board is comfortable with that, again, I take my direction from the board. But I think there are consequences both ways we need to consider. The example I've been using for this request is I don't like it, but it doesn't mean it's not the right decision. And I think that's very similar to a few months ago. I think you all recall when I made the recommendation to you all to use a limited amount of general fund money to play for the ambulance because of some of the contract issues we were dealing with. That was also a situation where I didn't like the decision we had to make, but it was the right decision. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's also how I feel about this. It doesn't sit great and it does kind of suck. And I wish there was a better option, but right now when it comes to these buoys, we're kind of handcuffed. And my recommendation is to move forward with this. But again, if you all would like to see something else or would like to discuss it further, explore some other options, I'm happy to do that as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in. As you know, I represented the township on the Harbor Authority for 4 years, and most of the discussions in those 4 years were about buoy placement. And you're right, Griffin, for a time, RJ Peterson handled it before Brent, and there wasn't, I don't think, as much cost to the township at that point. But I also want to point out, I mean, is it 4 we have buoys?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Now, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that this is a case where the tri-communities, we are really different. The cities have many more buoys. They also have public marinas and public docks, and they have more docks, private ones too. So to Abby's point, I'd love to hear what some other townships on a water, river or lake, how they handle it. Because it's so hard for me now that I've gone through this for another year with you, that the ambulance comparison. The ambulance millage serves half our population, and this is serving 4 or 5 people. And I know there were some complaints that we took last year about when they were going in, would they be in by Memorial Day? But it wasn't. The phones didn't light up. There was a couple of people. So I don't know. Part of me feels like, and especially now, as Brenda pointed out, with the water levels up so high, it's going to make accurate placement harder than ever, and the placement appropriateness is going to change as the water either recedes at some point, even though we're told it's probably going to rise for 6 more months. So I kind of feel like, I mean, I'm glad you found a solution that's budget neutral. That's great news. But then what if next year we decide to stop this and then we've got these buoys? I would not support not doing it this year for a variety of reasons, but I want to hear what other people might prefer or not.
Brenda?
I was just going to ask, if we go a different route next year, couldn't we sell them? That's one question, but so I'm looking at this map. Is this all houses along the no-wake zone? Because there's a lot. There's only 4 property owners that are affected by this. And is any of the other property that is there wetlands or not private property?
I think folks are saying 4 or 5, they're generalized. It's a limited number of properties in that area. I think if you're looking at, those are all homes or cottages or whatnot. Also speaking to your comment of could we not buy or sell our equipment later, based on these estimates, I've actually been looking at purchasing used equipment to save us money. Yeah. And one of the other solutions to this equipment would be, we would actually be, they're GPS placed, and we would be using, instead of putting them in and out every year, including the chain and the anchor and the buoys, right. This is looking at a way to put them in with GPS, and then in the winter, all you do is switch it out with something that's called an ice buoy, which, so moving forward, it would save us installation costs and removal costs moving forward. So again, if you all would like to discuss this more, please, again, don't take this any other way, but a lot of these concerns staff has been looking into to try to find the best way to address this moving forward. That absolutely doesn't change the fact that you all are right. I mean, it's all just a matter, is this something you all would like to spend money on? And again, we would need that amendment to do so. So that's why the decision's up to you all.
And can I add one other thing? Last year, a friend of mine, we have a lot, I'm on Silver Lake, as you all know. So we don't have the no wake buoys out here, but this friend of mine came in from the area where the buoys are, and some of these fishing boats are so low and so flat, they're really hard to see, and a lot of them are gray. Anyway, he did not see one of the fishing boats, and there's a lot of them in this particular area. He went right over them. Nobody got hurt. 2 people went flying. It was all good. But my fear, even more than the erosion, is if you don't put buoys in, you're going to have a lot of people going awfully fast in that area. And there are a lot of people who fish there. So my preference is for putting them in and then figuring out what we can do to make this better. I like your idea of buying used ones. I didn't even think of that.
I also don't know, I haven't had the opportunity to look into what is the potential liability. So what risk would the township be absorbing for not putting buoys in the water?
That's a good point too.
Because the no wake zone still exists, but it's not enforceable without the buoys. And I just have to tell you, at this point in time, I don't know what risk or liability that could put us in.
Yeah.
Can you do just 2 buoys by chance? I mean, one at the beginning, one at the end, or?
Excuse me?
Can you do just 2 buoys, like one at the beginning of the no wake zone and one at the end of the no wake zone, or does it have to be 4? Or, I mean, I'm just looking for a way to save some money.
The short answer is I don't know, but I would also encourage you to okay, so we would save $750. I think the conversation we're having is not necessarily about the amount of money. It's, is this something that you all as the board want to spend money on, yes or no? And I think maybe that's the guidance that's going to be helpful. And you know, if it's not overstepping, I wouldn't worry as much about if it's $750, $1,200, or $1,500.
We could get a tree.
Pay for the new faucet in the bathroom.
Yeah, I think
honestly,
I have a lot of money myself. But
Again, I think, remember that this is money in this year's budget, and those projects we're talking about for next year's budget.
Yeah. And to me, I would struggle more with the faucet in trade for safety. So
Okay.
it's more of an issue in Saugatuck, but there's a whole bunch of other things that can happen when you have marinas. But where we are, it's more safety and erosion.
Okay.
So are you, I'm
Try
sorry.
not to get off topic too much here. We're running quite late. Does anybody have anything new to add? Stacy? Abby? Brenda?
Nope.
John?
Nope.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
All right, I will move to approve the requested May 2020 budget amendments as submitted and authorize the township manager to proceed with purchasing new or used, can we say that?
Yes.
No wake buoy equipment.
Okay, I have a motion by Marcy. Do I have a second? Any second? All right, it looks like this motion dies on the table. Is there any other motion?
I would move to table this until next month's meeting when we can hopefully have some information about what other townships do in these situations and information regarding the potential liability
I don't know. Can I-
associated with removing them.
Do I have any support?
I'll support that.
Supported by Helmrich. Is there any other discussion?
The only thing I would say is I know this is COVID time and maybe we won't have a lot, but just keep in mind Memorial Day weekend is coming very soon. So waiting a month might be too long. I know that Griffin will get a lot of calls, but I'm just putting that out there. I have no idea what the holidays are going to look like here. So
Probably a lot quieter than we're used to.
Memorial Day is usually quieter than the rest.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah.
it usually rains Memorial Day. I know we did that. And I think last year we didn't get them until just after Memorial Day.
So I'll go ahead and call the question. Motion is to table till next month. Bigford,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
No.
Osmond, yes. Aldrich,
Yes.
motion carries 4-1.
Okay.
Next item. Committee reports, Planning Commission. I think we know everything that went on now at the Planning Commission.
I'd still like to submit my report, madam.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, we have had some introduction to this earlier in the evening. So the Planning Commission met via Zoom on April 27th with public participation on the Zoom call. There was only one agenda item, and that was, as you all know now, the Van Horn application for the removal of the dugout sand from the excavation of the water skiing water feature on the property. Public comment was heard from 5 or 6 people, all opposing the application. Most of them were neighbors of the property. The applicant, Van Horn, was responding to the tabling of this item from the meeting in February, which had also served as the official public hearing. The Planning Commission voted approval of the revised application with restrictions set on the hours of operation and the need to protect the bike trail at the Blue Star Highway entrance to the property. The vote was 5-1. I had suggested tabling this once again for further study and receiving more feedback and updating on the licensing situation from EGLE, which is the former Department of Environmental Quality, the state agency that still has to approve this. The Planning Commission is not scheduled to meet in May. And I just want to make a comment that I plan to share with my colleagues on the Planning Commission, but this has come up in some of the comments earlier today, and it kind of comes up from time to time. I'm still concerned that when the Planning Commission votes on certain things, that they're not always clearly and explicitly stating the findings of fact and giving great details and spelling that out as we on the commission are required to do. And I don't think in this case they at all address explaining how approval would be harmonious with the neighborhood. So I just share that with you, and again, I'm going to share that with my colleagues on the Planning Commission. And I was going to mention the videos that were submitted today, but we already heard from that from Scott W. in the comments section. Thank you.
Road Commission.
I have nothing to report. Griffin?
I think a noteworthy update would be I spoke with the road commission this week about the Riverside Dugout Road project because that was of particular interest to a number of residents, and it's continuing to move forward. They're continuing to attempt to acquire the necessary right of way to then be able to bid out that project and be able to construct that project. The plan is to still be able to do that either late summer or early fall this year. But obviously with COVID-19, things have been delayed. So that's what I know at this time.
Fire board.
Year-to-date call volume was down 17% compared to last year. With reduced traffic and people staying home, it sure has had an impact. You have to go back to April 2013 to see call volume this low. The response time was low compared to previous years, 4 minutes and 25 seconds for April, 5:19 for the year. April had only 17 priority 1 and 2 calls. Motor vehicle incidents are again very low due to the stay-at-home order. There was one bizarre incident wherein a driver lost control of his truck and ended up in the Kalamazoo River when he tried to launch a boat. And Douglas came in higher compared to the township, mainly due to one frequent caller, but that's unusual.
Okay, thank you. Griffin, Parks Commission.
I shared with you all with the last minute materials today a report submitted by Parks Commission Chair Jim Searing. The Parks Commission has not met in several months. They're taking precautions due to the COVID-19 crisis. However, I would like to acknowledge that a number of the Parks Commission members have been going out of their way to make sure our parks are being taken care of. I know Commissioner Lori Goshorn has been working out at River Bluff Park on some potential trails and keeping the trails clean. So I really appreciate all of her work there. The Parks Commission's looking into the lock donations box that we have at the dog park because it appears to be getting a significant amount of use. I will give you all a little bit more of an update in regard to Sundown Park. Here are my manager's comments towards the end of the meeting. Other than that, the Parks Commission plans to meet in June. If they need to have a meeting by Zoom or if they can meet in person, but they plan to have a meeting in the future and continue to discuss items such as the budget as related to a potential donations policy and the other items they've been working so hard on. So that's all I have at this time, but I did submit to you all the written report from Chair Jim Searing.
Thank you. Cal Lake, probably not. Mike, are you here?
No, he's not there.
Emergency Services Committee.
Tony was here. Is Tony here?
Yes,
No,
he's
back.
there. Yeah, he's here.
Muted.
Oh,
There he is.
ENT's pad.
TNT? Okay.
Yeah. You want to unmute him, maybe, Griffin? You can do that.
Yeah, he's muted.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
Hey, there we go. There we
Good.
go. It is quite late. If I fall asleep, I apologize. No, thank you, everybody. It's been interesting listening to everything that you're doing, and you're doing a lot of work. Thank you very much for all the work you're putting into our community. Tony Shipper here. I am your representative for the Emergency Services Committee. I represent the south half of Saugatuck Township, just to clarify that for people that might be listening. I think you all know why we're here, but just a brief update that back in December of 2019, we got to meet the new regional manager from AMR, John Robin. And at that meeting, he was kind enough to let us know that he was not happy with the contract that we had for the ambulance service. And the price was not high enough, and he put us up to $195,000, which opened the door for us to do some research and look around and see what we could do maybe with another ambulance service. John did offer us a alternative coverage idea. And basically he put it to us, if you don't want the 195, we won't have a contract and we'll service you in a different way. But he never got into detail what that other way would be. But working on an ambulance for 20 years, I know that the Fenville system it's not a high priority for that ambulance company. And where would they service us from? Every ambulance would probably come from the Family Fair area, and even as far east as Myers, which they call Central Point. So with that, all of the board members were pretty much set back, and I think you guys were too when we first heard of the $195,000.
Yeah.
But after we all got settled down, started making phone calls, talking to each of the different board members. And I want to note too that I also involved Saugatuck Township. I called and got some input from them also, because they're from the fire board, from the fire department. So with that, we come to an understanding that we would contact Life Ambulance, and we did that. Don Nagel and myself, we had a meeting with Mr. Mark Myers and his operations manager, John Pinkster, and they agreed that they would rewrite their proposal for the Fenville Area Ambulance Service. And after we got that proposal from those guys, and we'll go over that with you guys here in just a few minutes, we got the proposal, we talked some more with all the board members, and then we ended up having a meeting on May 7th. We all got together and we did our social distancing like we were supposed to, and we compared Life versus AMR. And it 5 out of the 6 communities agreed that Life would be the way to go. Lee Township was a little bit hesitant. The reason for that is that they had an offer from Pride Ambulance, and our board secretary did send communication to Pride Ambulance if they wanted to rebid our area. They never got back to the board, but they did get a hold of Lee Township and said that they would do their community for the $15,000 that they're paying. So the rep from Lee said we'd have to go back and talk to their board and so on. Monday night was their board meeting, and I went and attended that meeting to see how they were going to go. And what they decided to do, they thought it was a very nice gesture that Pride would do that for Lee Township, but they wouldn't do the rest of the communities. Lee Township said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to be part of this community. We're going to be part of the other communities, and we will go with Life Ambulance. They were willing to spend from $15,000. I think their portion must be about $38,000 or $40,000. So they're willing to spend that extra money so we could all be in this together and help each other. Now, why should we go with Life? I think you all have that EMS or Life EMS report and the amendment for A. You guys have that in front of you? And do you have it'd be that on the heading up there. But what it does, the biggest reason that we would go with Life is because of the cost. Life Ambulance, they did quote us $207,000 to get started for the first year. But after communicating with Mr. Myers and their operations manager, they agreed to start the first year at $195,000. The second year, they would jump to $212,000. The third year, $217,000. But if you turn that page and you look at Life Ambulance's cost per call versus AMR's cost per call, the non-emergency priority 3 transport to the hospital, Life Ambulance would charge $529. The mileage is $16.50 a mile. AMR's cost for the same type of call is $1,693 plus $36.74 a mile. I've got it broken down, but what it really comes down to, we gave Life how many calls AMR ran in this service area, and it equates to, at AMR's price versus Life's price, Life gave our community $1.25 million in call cost. That's a lot of money. And if you look at it, you guys were just talking about priority 1 calls, the fire department and so on. What I did is I added the mileage to AMR's cost for a priority 1 call. And if we do that by 10, if we had 10 priority 1 calls for AMR versus Life, there's a $13,860 savings in 10 calls in priority ones. Priority 2 calls, at 10 calls, there's $11,460 savings. In priority 3s, there's a $7,280 savings. That comes to $32,600 in the first 30 calls in the community that we would save by going to Life Ambulance. Life does offer a Life Care Plus membership, just like the AMR offers a Ambicare membership. AMR raised their price for the Ambicare to $85. Life's Life Care, which is an Ambicare membership, is still only $49. And it offers some nice things, benefits to that package. They also offer other things in the community. They have a Lifeline type program that is being used down in Lee Township in a few homes and stuff, which allows the elderly to stay home longer. They got the push button. They have a lot of options for the community. But in the overall program, Life would be the way to go. Another reason for Life is response times would improve. And how would that improve? Right now, if you call 911 from your house, that goes to 911 dispatch. 911 dispatch calls AMR, then they call back to B11 or the station to dispatch the ambulance. That's the AMR way. If you have Life is dispatched. When you call 911, 911 calls Life right back. It's a direct line. There's no second party that information's got to get transferred to. And being in that ambulance, many times we would hear the pager go off for the fire department, so we had to go to a call. We would be en route 2 to 3 minutes before we would get the call from our dispatcher from AMR. So I would say that there would be pretty easy a 2-minute savings in response times for our communities. Yeah, guys, I know it's going to be a tough decision. I can tell you, because of the time frame, we only have to July 31st to get everything in place and for all that to work. I know that Life is being very active in getting on it. They're actually writing a contract through Don Nagel's request. What would the contract look like? Because we don't have much time left. We've been working on this since December. Lots of meetings, lots of phone calls. So there is a contract being written that I'll have available for you guys to look at. Hopefully, we'll have that contract to look at on May 21st. We're having another meeting for the board, so we can talk some more about this and get that contract to you guys, and then you'll have to make that decision of which way you want to go. I think it was very generous of Life Ambulance to lower that cost down to $195 to help us. You compare that the way AMR brought it to our attention and what they said to us, it was $195 or nothing. There was no trying to help these communities get to where we had to be. And it was, I know every community, every member there was just scratching their head through all the phone calls. They are all going to make it work. And I can only suggest to you that we do make it work, and work with Life Ambulance. I can't imagine how it's going to work if we have an ambulance coming. I can imagine what's going to happen. That response time to the south half of Saugatuck Township will get much longer than what it is now, and we just can't have that. Do you have any questions?
I think it's a no-brainer myself. It sounds like an incredible deal that you've worked out, and if the other municipalities would like to go that way, I feel that we should too. We just had an ambulance ride from Holland Hospital to my house for $1,025. So I get it. Yeah.
And that
was that when I ordered it. Yeah.
How does that equate to the end user, the patient? Yes, the insurance will pay some, the co-pay, you got that Ambicare membership will cover some of that, but there's going to be some left. And the higher the bill is, the more out-of-pocket costs there is going to be for our community.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good deal that you worked out, actually. So.
Well, thank you. Lots of phone calls.
No, I was going to say, Tony, the amount of time you've put into this is incredible, and we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And then I don't know if My question's, I think it's more a question for Griffin.
Okay.
And that's just, because I could look it up, but relative to the budget impact, is our 5% of a potential new life contract what's in the tentative budget we approved today?
Approximately. I mean, as Tony mentioned, I mean, we're going to need to see an actual contract to know what our share would be for sure.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't, the fact that that's what's in the proposed budget for next year, I think the point the board still needs to remember is that's still a 2.5 times increase from what we paid this year.
Right.
So, I mean, we would need to make that work with the special assessment we charge for that area. But if you all are comfortable with a 2.5 time increase with that service, I mean, Tony and I can continue to work to do what we can to prepare and review an agreement for you all.
Okay,
Correct me if I'm wrong. Our alternatives would be losing any service or attempting to adjust the assessment.
John, I'm going to ask you to hold that till after we get the contract for discussion. Because
sure.
right now, there's too many unknowns and we don't know.
Fair enough.
I would like to thank Tony for making that report. It was an awesome report and he put a lot of work into it.
Well, thank you.
Okay, open board report. Stacy.
I just wanted to say I'm excited about investigating the Ryan Kilpatrick proposals, looking into that further. I think it's something our area could really use. And that's about it.
Okay, Abby.
I know this is a long meeting. I feel like we got a great deal of business covered. I feel good about it. The one suggestion that I have, and it kind of comes from Lori Goshorn's comment, is I do really support the idea of us, if we're going to be attending these meetings remotely, that we do enable the video portion when connectivity allows for it.
Brenda. Brenda, are you there?
Sorry. No, I have nothing else.
Okay, John.
I have one thing, and it's a fun, good thing I'm happy to share. I think it was just 2 days ago, I got the email from the MTA, the Michigan Townships Association. Back whenever it was, Brenda, when did we go to Kalamazoo for that training session at Western Michigan? But
It wasn't that long ago, but it seems like forever.
yeah, it was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we met at that workshop. One of the women at MTA that works on the monthly magazine, and they do, as I'm sure you all know, because this month's Mays are all in your inboxes at the office. They just came in. But they do a profile of a township around the state. And we had just said, wow, it'd be so cool if you did us sometime. Anyway, she emailed me 2 days ago to say they'd like us to be up next. Good news is the article and photographs would not be due. I think it's the end of the first week of June, which is soonish, but not terribly quick. So I wanted to share that with you guys. If you're open to it, I'd be willing to draft something, but I'd want everyone to give some input, and I can send out the parameters that she sent me. And the article, it's going to be 350 words and accompanied by some photographs. So I throw that out there. I hope you're into doing it, and we can figure out how to proceed and take advantage of this opportunity.
Very cool.
Okay, and Cindy, I just have a comment. I hope Lori's still listening. If not, I will communicate to her by email. I live in the very rural part of township and do not have good internet connectivity. And when I enable the video, I get internet connection instability, and the alternative would be for me to call in by phone. And then not only could you not see me, I could not see Griffin's screens. So I think that there's some of our other board and commission members who also live out here where there's the middle of nothing. I just have a jetpack and it just can't handle too much streaming stuff. Depending on the time of the month, I do get some higher speed. So I do try it every time I log in, and it just doesn't always work. And I think that's all. It was a long meeting, and I would ask at our next meeting that you ask to be recognized before speaking, because it does get a little bit off track. And I know if you can't see my face, it's a lot harder. Brenda?
I was just going to say to that, using the hand raising function is a great way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So you know.
Can't see it, only Griffin can see it. So maybe we could let Griffin do a little bit more of the.
Yeah.
For this hand raising.
If you have a lot of people, this hand raising isn't as good.
Yeah, true.
Now we have a real small group now, so.
Yeah, and I can't see everybody. I can only see 3 or 4 people at a time.
Okay.
You see that?
I can see that. You're at the top. You're at the top of the people that I can see.
I just see your name now. No, I think that was a great explanation, and I just think we should probably remind Andy Preetz. I mean, I think if that was stated at the beginning of any Zoom meeting, I think it would foster more understanding.
I know I stated it when we first logged in, and there were just a few of us, but I did not do it in the public meeting. So,
are there these things?
You were in more detail this time, so that was really good and helpful. And I'm sorry about your situation.
Is there a thing you can buy I don't know, a hotspot or something that gives you?
That's what I have. It's the jetpack.
Okay, that doesn't work either. Okay.
Well, it works. I mean, I can get in, but it's a very low bandwidth.
Okay.
So,
you could put a tower in like they did on Bayou Trail.
There you go. Okay, now we'll move on to the manager's report, I think is next.
Yay.
Yes, thank you. So a few things to exercise an abundance of caution and due to the ongoing public health crisis, as you all know, staff made the difficult decision a few weeks ago to cancel Spring Cleanup Day 2020. It was a difficult decision. We didn't take it lightly, but due to a number of factors, it was the right decision for us right now. Residents are encouraged to contact their waste management companies, providers for options regarding additional service if necessary. I fielded a number of phone calls and understand a number of folks look forward to that every day. And at this point, all I can really say is I look forward to Fall Cleanup Day. Sundown Park remains closed due to the high water levels and damage to the drain under the park, but I am pleased to announce that we've been working closely with the Drain Commissioner's office, and we're getting really close to a temporary solution to be able to transfer some of the water from the damaged drain into a neighboring drain, which would, at least in the short term, preserve some of the stability of the bluff in that area until the water levels go down or until we can figure out a longer term solution. Number 3, last week, the Michigan Supreme Court decided to hear the lawsuit between the township and the Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance. The township's legal team will prepare and coordinate the necessary briefs. I have a phone call with Attorney Jim Straub tomorrow, and we'll hopefully have additional information to share with you after that. But as it is an ongoing lawsuit, please direct any questions you may get from the press or others to me. Looking ahead, in addition to what is a number of items from this meeting for next month, we will also have a number of agenda items for the June Township Board meeting, including the public hearing on the proposed 2020-2021 budget. As Lene mentioned a little bit, code enforcement, something staff's been struggling with a lot over the past year. We get a lot of concerns, a lot of code enforcement complaints, and how our organization's currently set up and with the time and resources allocated to code enforcement, we're not able to fulfill all those complaints. That's partially why the township has a tradition of trying to promote voluntary compliance. But one thing we're going to do is we're going to work with one of our attorneys and Lene to prepare a memo for you all of what next steps would look like and what the costs and time commitments would be if you all wanted to take some next steps on some of those enforcement matters. But really with everything we've done, it just comes to priorities. Unfortunately, the way our organization is set up and with our limited staff and resources, we're not able to do everything. And I know that makes difficult decisions for you all, but as the elected officials for the organization, I know we're gonna hopefully bring you all some information and look to you all for some guidance regarding next steps. It's also our goal to review some components of the fee schedule and escrow policy, understanding with how busy we're going to be that may need to be pushed off another month, but that's something that staff's been looking at and really would like to see reviewed in addition to all the other items on the township board's priority list. And we'll also bring end of the year budget amendments and transfer requests for you all at the next meeting. So I could give many other updates. I'm very proud to be able to say, you know, given the unfortunate situation of the public health crisis, the township's still moving forward. We're still working really hard to advance as many of your goals as possible, as I think is shown by such a long meeting tonight. I know they're not here, but I want to thank all our presenters and that Lene took the time to be here and all the work that Tony Shippa is doing on behalf of the township. But other than that, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Griffith? John?
No, I'm good.
Brenda? Abby?
Nope.
Stacy? Nope. With that, we have to do another public comment period.
Yes,
So-
I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. Everyone should be unmuted. If there's anyone who would like to speak, will you please state your name and we'll add you to the speakers list?
Oh, will the videos at me?
Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Tony Shippa.
Yes, Tony, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else who would like to be added to the list? Okay, hearing none, Madam Chair, Tony Shippa is the only one on the list.
Okay, he has the floor.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to speak in reference to your no wake zone on the river. I take it that it would be to the west down the river, headed out towards the mouth. Is that correct? Anyway, being on that river for many years as a charter boat captain and fishing and so on, there's a lot of other people you have to consider other than just the landowners there. You got small boaters, people with a lot smaller boats. You got kayakers, you got people on canoes, you got people on water boards, that if that no wake is not, if they're not able to enforce that, you're going to put them people in them canoes and all those at danger or in danger. The police department, they need that tool in order to enforce the safety part of that no wake zone. And unfortunately, think about this, a guy gets out of work Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, he's going to get on the river, get out to the lake to go fishing. He is going to be in a hurry. I've seen him time and time again. And I myself, being on my charter boat, have had to remind people, slow down. And in turn, we're kind of in a hurry, fished a little bit late. People have got to remind us to slow down, and vice versa. If that is not there, people will take advantage of that and laugh right at the police officer and says, there's nothing you can do about it, and I'll do what I want. That is a safety factor there, guys. I would encourage you to go ahead, to go with the no wake zone buoys. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Hearing none, I think we will accept a motion to adjourn.
Nobody wants to leave. I'll motion to adjourn the meeting of May 13th, 2020 at 9:33.
Motion by Marcy. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Aldrich. I'll call the roll. Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Aldrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
And Helmrich.
Yes.
Motion or meeting adjourned.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Griffin.
Good night.
Guys.
Good night.